The Chris Bosh has a key decision right now. He could take 4 years, $90 million or whatever it is from the Rockets, or he could take less to help Miami win, not knowing if LeBron is going to leave a year or 2 years from now. First of all, do you think that's fair to Chris Bosh?
I mean, fair is almost, I mean, at least he has a choice, right? So fair or not, the ball is in his court. And there is sort of psychic value to things like, I like Miami, I like my house, my family's happy, I like playing with LeBron, that makes up for lost money. I just think the issue is sort of simplified when it gets into the public domain, because the salary cap, frankly, is just so complicated that even a lot of people who, follow the sport closely don't understand it. And so they either think owners need to spend a lot of money or players should take pay cuts, and there's a lot of yelling and screaming. But it's a complicated thing, and the lockout and the new CBA made it even more complicated. But at least Bosh has a choice, right? I mean, yes. and it's unclear now after the Heat's landmark signings of Josh McRoberts and Danny Granger. It's unclear how much of a cut he'll actually have to take, because my guess is they're going to operate over the salary cap, use the mid-level exception on McRoberts, the biannual exception on Granger. And if they do that, depending on a few variables, Bosh might not actually have to take a pay cut that's all that big. And really, he's the one that this is about, right? LeBron's going to get the max. Wade deserves a pay cut. Bosh is in the prime. Bosh is going to sacrifice earning power. He's the one that really is the center of this.
Well, the irony is Bosh should just go to Houston. And you pointed out some of the reasons in your piece today. It's a better basketball situation for him. It's the most possible money to probably be on a better team. And unless, who knows the relationship LeBron and Wade have with Bosh and how long that's gone back, and whether in 2007 or 2008 these guys all talked about playing together and they're worried about one of them breaking out of the circle. Like, who knows what kind of history they have. But just as a basketball move, you put him with Dwight Howard, with Harden and Parsons spreading the floor, with Beverly, with whatever other shooting point guard they come up with in free agency. And he'd probably be happier, and it would be less pressure, and he'd have just as good of a chance to win the NBA title next year, don't you think, with that team?
That's a monster team. Two counters. I'm not sure he would be happier, because he's said how delightful life is in Miami, how much he loves it there, and how much he loves playing with LeBron. The other counter is, and I think this matters a lot to players, the Rockets are in the Western Conference. And the Heat, look, we all want to pretend like, man, the Heat just got smushed in the finals. Wade's a disaster. The roster's a total mess. They made the finals, and there's like no sign of them not making the finals unless Chicago sort of nails their summer and becomes a real threat to them. Wouldn't that matter to you? I think I agree with you. The Houston fit is awesome. They would be a monster team with Bosh. But The West is like that. You could still lose in the first round.
Well, if you're Houston, it's weird because I think Carmelo's a better player than Bosh. I kind of like the fit of Bosh more than Carmelo for them. I just think the kind of player they need isn't somebody who's going to score 28 a game. That wasn't their problem last year. The floor spacing and some of the stuff he does defensively, the fact that he doesn't care if he scores 20 points night to night. I'm not sold on Carmelo and Harden together. And then Carmelo, Harden, and Dwight all together as the three leaders of your team, I think is a little wonky. But then if I'm Bosh, I'm looking the other way. Like they were asking a lot from him last year, especially in the playoffs, because Wade was so hit or miss, and Wade only played 54 games and all that stuff. And I don't see how that Wade situation gets better. I don't mean to be a pile on Dwayne Wade guy, but they put him in the optimal situation to succeed last year. And I was on Le Batard's show yesterday, and Le Batard was talking about how good Wade's stats were in the regular season, and was asking, like, are we overreacting because he ended the playoffs so badly? And the reality is that he rested 28 games, and he never played back-to-backs during the regular season. And if you put somebody like LeBron or Durant in a situation where they only had to play 54 games and never played back-to-backs, those guys would have incredible numbers. Part of being a superstar is playing 4 games in 5 nights and playing back-to-backs and playing when you don't feel right. And I don't think Wade can do that anymore. Do you?
Well, we have no evidence that he can, because the Heat told him to stop doing it. And that's the weird thing, though, is like, everyone thinks Wade's season was a disaster because of the last 4 games of the finals. He was awesome for a lot of the Eastern Conference Finals, and it just shows when maybe something happened in the middle of the Eastern Conference playoffs that we don't know about, or just how do you pinpoint the line after which Wade is just going to wear down? And I don't know that you can do that. I mean, maybe you play the same exact schedule next year and he's fine through the finals, and it would only have been, if there were a magical extra round where he would have broken down. I don't know how you figure that out. But yeah, I mean, this is what he's going to be. As long as he's on Miami and this is their team, they're clearly going to have this maintenance program in place, and all the evidence suggests they should.
Well, so this is something we were talking about on the TV show, because I was really dubious that once the playoffs really got going, and all of a sudden now, especially in the Eastern Finals, we had to go game, day off, that he was going to be able to handle it. I'm looking at his game logs right now, because when he got to the playoffs, okay, so here we go. When he got to the playoffs, he had a 4-game series against Charlotte, which was a sweep. And the game one was 2 days rest between game 1 and 2. 2 days rest between game 2 and game 3, and then game 4 they swept. So in the second series they played Brooklyn, and that went day off between games, and he finished that one. He had 28 in game 5, so it was his best game of that whole series. So there's a little bit of hope. But then that Indiana series, once you started going, game, those last 4, that's when he started to tail off, and he never recovered. Mm-hmm. And I just think he was in such a good situation to succeed, because not only were they resting him so much during the regular season, but I use this analogy like it's a baseball analogy, but he was the number 2 starter. He was an ace going against the other team's number 2 starter, right? Night after night after night. The other team's best perimeter defender was defending LeBron. Wade was always going against the second best guy, and a lot of times teams don't have a second best guy. So if he's going against Indiana, he's either got Lance Stevenson defending him, who he's got a size advantage on. He doesn't ever have to worry about Paul George or, George Hill or whatever. So when LeBron got into foul trouble in game 5, Paul George guarded Wade, and Wade couldn't do anything. So I just wonder, if you just put him as the best guy on another team, and the other team was able to be able to just throw their best defender at him night after night, what would his stats look like? I think it would be grisly. What do you think?
I bet he could still put up 18 and 6 right, as the number 1 option on a team. I don't know how good that team would be, and I think he knows that. I mean, he's not dumb. Yeah. He's 30. He's 32. He knows where he wants to be. He knows where his bread is buttered, and I don't think he wants to have all these dudes leave so he can be the alpha dog again. I think you're right. We have to work it's like Kobe, right? Everyone's with this. This has been driving me crazy with this, Melo might go to the Lakers thing that you reported and you broke the story on. Every analysis of that is oh, well, that would give the Lakers the second star they need. They can. And wait a second, Kobe's 35 and hasn't really played in a year and a half and is coming off 2 devastating knee injuries. You can't operate under the assumption that Kobe Bryant is going to be a star. And it's the same thing with Wade. You have to operate under the assumption that he's a 55-game player who's a third option on a great team, a second option on a good team that can't bring it every night. I mean, I just say you have to recalibrate your expectations, and some of us, I think, are slow to do that.
Yeah, and I think so. Your best case example of somebody when they hit this point in their career would be Dirk, and the way Dallas was able to figure out how to use Dirk. But Dirk had a couple of advantages. One, he's 7 feet tall. 2, he can still get his shots. And it's a little harder for him to get his shots, and he has to lean back a little bit more on that fall away. And, he shoots the threes, obviously become more and more important to him as he gets older. He doesn't run like he did. But it's easier for him to get his points, I think, than it would be for Dwayne Wade. But also, Dallas put him in a position where Monte Ellis was carrying a lot of what they did offensively in crunch time. In the same, they could go to Vince Carter, they had these other outs. What's happened with Wade, because he can't shoot threes, it's really that little weird high-low post game he has, that 12 feet from the basket post game, and they don't really run anymore, so he doesn't get fast break points anymore, really. I think it's just going to be harder and harder for him to score if he doesn't make threes. And the history of two guards isn't great when they hit like that season 12 to season 14 of their career. Kobe was able to fight it off. Ray Allen and Reggie Miller were able to fight it off, but those guys could shoot threes and kind of redefine themselves. And
they're total. Those guys are total anomalies. Ray Allen and Reggie Miller, total outliers. Shooting guards after 35 is like really dicey.
Right, and whether it's age or whether you say season 12 or whatever your cutoff line is, it's for whatever reason in a position that doesn't age that well. I think Joe Johnson, what is he? He's year 12, year 13. He's probably one of your best case scenarios for that position, and he's a guy who averages 17 a game now. So unless Wade was one of those phenomenal OCD workout guys like Reggie Miller and Ray Allen, he's going to be in trouble. And I thought Wade looked heavy last year. Did you see Dwayne Wade last year and think, oh my God, that guy's in amazing shape? Kobe was like that. I don't think Dwayne Wade was.
I don't know. He wasn't like OJ Mayo to me.
No,
for sure.
I'm not saying that.
I don't know. I didn't. His physical appearance didn't strike me, either way. Except as you mentioned, his game is floaters and post up shots because he can't really attack the basket with the ferocity that he used to be able to. And like we've seen like in the playoffs 2 years ago when they won their second title, he went through a stretch where he was like, I remember looking this up because I wrote about it every day. He was like 1 of 27 on post-up shots until he got hot late in the finals. And like we saw in these finals, like if you just lose a little bit of that oomph, all of a sudden those like 8-foot, 9-foot floaters, like you got to loft them a little higher. They're hitting the front of the rim. I just think that you just have to gamble that you can get him through a season. And if the season had ended in game 3 of the conference finals, it would have been a wild success. And it didn't end there. Obviously, it ended a couple weeks later, and it was not a wild success.
What's the right salary for him? I have the number in my head, but I want to hear what you think.
Well, it's funny because like this is what we always come up against in free agency. Like there's the right salary. There's what the market would pay. And there's what he's worth to a particular team that already has him, right? I think.
Let me flip the question around because this is a better way to do it. He's on the Spurs this whole time. What do the Spurs tell Dwayne Wade he's getting next season?
Well, that's the loaded question, right? Because he'd be Ginobili, and so he'd probably be paid like Ginobili, although he's a little bit younger. And has more recently put up sort of bigger numbers than Ginobili and played heavier minutes. So Ginobili made 7 this year. I would say under. I think a team would give Wade 10.
I think 10 is a great price.
And I think there might be an irrational team that could talk itself into 12 to 13.
That would be like a Charlotte. Would be like, oh great, we'll overpay Dwayne Wade. He's worth 10. We'll give him 13 a year for 4 years. We'll give you 52 for 4 years, Dwayne Wade. Come to Charlotte. I don't think anyone goes higher than that. I don't even think the Knicks would go higher than that if they had the cap space.
Oh, man, don't underestimate what the Knicks and the Nets
might do. I know.
Might
that's
do.
why I mentioned them. I just don't think he's a $20 million a year guy anymore. And that Miami must have some sort of plan with that. But considering he gave up 41.5 for 2 years, like, what kind of discount is he going to get? Bosh is the one who shouldn't take any discount whatsoever. And I agreed with your column today. Like, it shouldn't be up to him to take less because this team has to pay Dwayne Wade like a superstar because of all he means to Miami. You know what I mean? Like, that's not Chris Bosh's responsibility. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and that's the math. Like, Wade opted out of, 20 and 22, something like that, like 42
like 41
million.
and a half, yeah.
So if you, take the pessimistic view of Wade's career trajectory and say, okay, after those 2 seasons, in the next 2, let's just say his fair market value dips all the way to $6 million a year, like what Jody Meeks is now going to make. Even if you add 20, 22, 6, and 6, that's 54. And so you've got it, in other words, in order for Dwayne Wade in the worst case scenario of opting in order for him to opt out and be quote unquote made whole, the Heat are going to have to give him $54 million or something like that over 4 years.
Yeah, I agree.
And by the way, they have to do that. I mean, they can't, and that's why Haslam's deal is going to be fascinating. They have to make him whole. I mean, he opted out of a $4.6 million player option, and he literally cannot play. And I think there will not be I think it will be so frowned upon if they don't. He's got to make more than 4.6 over the length of whatever contract he signs, right? I mean, that's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, I thought it would be 3 years, $6 million, something like that. So it'd give them like a $2.5 million short-term relief, and then it would stretch out. I think they're in a lot of trouble because, for one thing, if Chicago ends up with Carmelo, that's a real problem for them. Chicago becomes the best team in the league. Even, and that's a whole other thing that's going on right now is the Lakers. I do think they, I stand by everything I tweeted and all the ensuing reports about, like, they did blow them away. They did a lot of good things in that meeting, and the franchise, he gets what the franchise means. He gets what it would mean like to be the next great Lakers star, living in LA, all the Hollywood opportunities. The fact that it's a little more laid back in LA. I think in New York, he's such a polarizing star, and there's just day after day of people wondering whether you can win with him or not. And I think he knows about that stuff, and he goes to the Lakers, and they're going to be happy to have him. But part of me does think like there has to be some leverage in the back of his head too here, because if he wants to go to the Bulls, he can only really go to the Bulls if the Knicks sign and trade him there. Now, the Knicks have no impetus to do that. Why would they help the Bulls get him if they want Carmelo? Like, that's ridiculous. You can't. They can't afford him, and they can't get him unless the Knicks help them. So the Knicks could basically just cockblock it and say you're staying here. Now, if he has the Lakers, and he's saying, well, you have to help me with the sign and trade, or else I'm going to the Lakers. That's a totally different negotiating strategy. And what would you do if he said that? If you're Phil Jackson, what would you do if he said that to you?
Well, and that just depends on, the Chicago thing could work the same, where he just says, I'm signing here for 15 or whatever they can open up.
He's not doing that.
I agree with you. It's unlikely. I think, look, I've said this from the beginning. I think if the Knicks can get assets, they will and should sign and trade him if the writing is on the wall. The Bulls can offer them more than the Lakers can. But look, every team that reaches this crossroads, almost every team, comes to it saying, "Oh, we're not helping them change teams. We're not going to do that. We're going to be stubborn and bite our nose to spite our face," or whatever the saying is. And then they get to it and they're like, "Well, okay, so we can get a couple of first round picks and like cap relief or something. Okay, well then I guess we're going to do that." So I think if push came to shove, yeah, the Knicks aren't going to be stubborn. If he's going to leave, they're going to sign and trade him.
Well, but the difference is, so when this happened with like Bosh and even LeBron in 2010, and it's happened a couple other times, the difference in money has been minimal, and it's like they're helping the guy get an extra $10 million over the course of his career or something like that. This is a huge difference. This is 23 a year with the Knicks versus 15 for Chicago, or 14 or whatever it ends up being. And, if I were the Knicks, I wouldn't help them, because I just don't think somebody leaves that much money on the table to be in a quote unquote winning situation.
So in other words, you force him to say, "Oh, you're serious about the Lakers? Then you're not just using it as leverage to get us to sign and trade you to the Bulls. Okay, good luck with the Lakers."
Yeah, that would be the risk. The risk would be now you're playing a game of chicken, and you're like, "All right, well, either you come here, you know what you have over here, and a year from now we're gonna have all this cap space and it's gonna be awesome, and we'll talk to you about what players we're getting. It's gonna be great. You're gonna love it, or go play with Kobe." And you're stuck with Kobe for the next 2 years. You won't be able to add really any other free agents. You better hope Julius Randle's good right away. You better hope Powell comes back. You better hope Steve Nash has one last great season in him. Like, good luck. But if I were Carmelo, like if I had those two choices, what would you do if you could either be on, if you knew Powell was coming back to the Lakers, you could be on that Laker team with the Nash expiring. You could basically pick your coach. And Durant's coming in 2 years to free agency, so maybe they're down the road. There's more help. Kevin Love a year from now, stuff like that. Or you go with the Knicks. You go back to the city a lot of the teammates and a year from now they're going to have a crap load of cap space. What would you do?
I mean, should I operate under the assumption that the Lakers have a better chance at Durant and Kevin Love than the Knicks in New York City? I mean, if that's the case, I'm going to go to the Lakers. But if there are equal chances of getting another star free agent, I like New York. I'm comfortable where I am. Phil Jackson is interesting. I think I would probably stay with the Knicks.
I think I would too. But the one catch is Kevin Love being a free agent a year from now, and they never traded him. So now it's pretty clear he's going to be a free agent. I just don't see the deal happening with him. Now everything could change in February, but I would say at this point, if you're Kevin Love and you didn't get traded before the season, you're just going to ride it out and become a free agent, no matter who trades for you. I don't know the team out there that would trade for him that he'd be like, yeah, I'm in for an extension. Plus, isn't there a rule you can't even sign an extension after like October 30th, right?
The extension has been taken away as a real tool for star players for 9,000 reasons in the new CBA. But I think he's still going to be traded. I don't think he's playing the season for the Timberwolves, but that's one we've disagreed. I still think it's going to happen. I don't think his value is any different now than it was at the draft than it will be in September. I mean, everyone knows the situation. Every team that is going to trade for him is going to try to get some assurances that he's going to be willing to stay. So I just think it's an untenable situation. But again, you and I have talked about this. Try to be the Blazers. You have a good nucleus. You should have been better last year. Maybe everything breaks right for you. Yeah.
I would keep him. And ride it out for a couple months and hope that you could become next year's breakout team and look at all the different reasons why it didn't work last year, which, they had a really bad coaching situation. And maybe that'll get better. They had bad luck in close games. Maybe that gets better. Love's playing for a new contract. You're never going to get a more focused, motivated Kevin Love. Rubio's playing for a new contract. So, the rub is that they're in the West. And the West is a monster. Especially Phoenix, which I assume has one move in them, right? What is the move?
No one can figure out what the Suns are doing. They haven't popped up in any of the Kevin Love rumors, even though they have the kind of package that could get them in the conversation. I think they're swinging for the fences. I really think they're serious about, we want a meeting with LeBron. I think they want a meeting with LeBron. I think they want a meeting with Melo. I think that's what they're focused on, and they just let Channing Frye walk rather than try and compete with that weird offer that he got from Orlando. And Channing Frye was an important part of their team last year. And if they don't replace him with something, not necessarily an equivalent, big man shooter, the West, they're taking a step back, and they have a lot of cap room and ways to maneuver. I just don't know. They're not going to be a Lance Stevenson team. Maybe they'll go after Chandler Parsons, but all you do there is sort of force Houston's hand. And after that, I don't really know, they'll bring back Bledsoe. That's great. I don't know what the outside guy that's driving you, that's keeping you in the playoff race. I don't know who that's going to be. Who's it going to be? I don't know. Who are they getting?
I'm glad you brought up Parsons, because this is something that really bugged me about the first week of free agency. When you make a restricted offer, is he what is his status? Is he restricted or he's not restricted?
He is restricted. He is restricted. They
did
let
that weird thing.
Yeah, they let him be a free agent 1 year earlier than he could have been.
So he's restricted. I didn't know if he was he counted the way Bledsoe counts. Because that whole thing about how I was just confused by how they handled that whole thing. It made me think they had a wink-wink deal with him. But if you're Phoenix on July 1st, this is a team that's in your conference that you're trying to beat. You have the cap space. I think it's 4 days from restricted offer getting the contract offer to when the team has to decide to match it.
72 hours, 3 days.
72 hours. On July 1st, offer him the max. Now Houston has to, on July 4th, decide whether they're matching it or not. The moment they match it, they can't get any of the free agents.
Well, I believe that clock starts ticking July 10th when the moratorium was.
July 10th. There you go.
Yeah,
but I'm saying you do it now. Now you put the speed clock on Houston, where on July 10th they have to figure out if. But I don't even know.
Their 3-day clock starts. Yeah.
Yeah, but why aren't teams doing this with? And by the way, teams should be doing that with Eric Bledsoe too. These teams are the 72 hours is not long. Just go in, throw the thing out. Now you're taking out a suitor and you're driving up somebody else's price. Because we all know Bledsoe's going back to Phoenix. We know Gordon Hayward's going back to Utah. We know Parsons going back to Houston. So just put a gun to their head.
I think you just answered your own question, which is if we all know that, what could happen in those 72 hours? I could lose out on everyone else that I want or the top three guys on my list.
Nobody ever signs the first 4 days. That's the thing. It's who are they losing out on? LeBron was fishing for a week. You're not losing out on LeBron. I don't think these teams are competitive enough sometimes.
You're losing out on all the guys who have agreed to terms verbally when the moratorium is going on, like all the guys who have already agreed, like Frye and Meeks and Ben Gordon and all these other guys we could name. You're losing out on all those guys because they can't.
I'm glad I'm losing out.
They can't renege on the deals that they've made, but there's a risk. It is a shorter time period. Like I was talking to an executive a couple of days ago. It used like 2 or 3 CBAs ago. I think it was like 14 days.
Yeah, it was.
Or something
it was 2
crazy
weeks.
like that. Like why would you ever?
Days.
Yeah, you would never sign a restricted. No one would ever go after them because that's lunacy.
If I was a GM in the NBA, I would be that guy. I would be like, all right, July 1st, Parsons, max, right now. Here's my offer. Take it. And then Houston will just resign. It'll be great for you. Then July 4th, hey, Eric Bledsoe, here's the max. Take it. They're just going to resign you anyway. And just go, and I would knock out all my competitors.
Well, if, the guy who did that is Daryl Morey, and he did it 2 years ago.
That's why everybody hates him.
And he did it exactly. Everyone hates him. He did it 2 years ago, but he did it because he had the poison pill thing in his back pocket, and that resulted in the high comedy of the Knicks literally hiding in Las Vegas, like Glenn Grunwald running around like cloak and dagger to try and avoid the offer sheet. Like the Rockets, remember that the Rockets literally couldn't find him. It was like no sign of Glenn Grunwald at the hotel. Oh, Glenn Grunwald switched blackjack table. Like no one could find him.
Hey, has anyone explained to Channing Frye yet that just because you're one of the best pick and pop guys in the league, you still have to have the other guy in that pick and pop has to be able to shoot for teams not to just stand next to you on the 3-point line? I think he's going to be in a rude awakening next year, in for a rude awakening on Orlando. Oh, wait, the guy's standing next to me now. I can't shoot threes anymore. This sucks. It's a problem.
The reaction among the people I talked to around the league to that contract was fascinating because I love Channing Frye.
I did too.
Big guys who can set screens and shoot threes. I mean, you talked about Dirk. That's what Dirk is. And like Channing Frye's not Dirk, but he's sort of, tier down just as a shooter. They're enormously valuable, but there are a lot of people around the league, I was surprised, who are like, that's a terrible deal. Channing Frye's not as good as people think he is. He was good last year. Whatever the numbers are, he was good last year because they had Dragic and Bledsoe.
Yes.
And what is he going to be like without those players? That was interesting to me, that reaction.
Well, that's one of those cases where you got to know who you are and why you're succeeding. And we see this happen in sports, and we even see it in pop culture too, where do what you're good at and make sure you're around people that accentuate what you're good at. If he'd gone to Golden State, he would have been great. That would have been a great team for him. He would have been really good with Curry. It would have been scary to watch him set the little picks where he pops back out and Curry and what he do. And there's nobody like that in Orlando. So he's basically eliminated the best skill that he has with the team that he chose. Because he's not running that with Elfrid Payton. He's not running it with Oladipo. Good luck. But you see that time and time again. Teams forget what it is that made them succeed. And he was in an awesome situation in Phoenix with a team that was really fun to play on and had really good guards, that had multiple guards that he could do what he likes to do.
I guess the flip side would be, from Orlando's perspective, maybe his shooting makes it a little easier for all the young guards that they have, like Oladipo and Payton and everyone else. Like, in other words, you're running these pick and rolls with Big Baby and Kyle O'Quinn and Andrew Nicholson and Jason Maxiell and guys that have to set screens and roll 15 feet from the basket, and no one cares about them shooting 15-footers. Maybe it gets a little easier for the young guys. They have some room to breathe. But Orlando is like the Bucks from last year. No one can figure out what the hell they're doing.
It's a fantasy team. Danny Chow said, Grantland's Danny Chow in the office yesterday, he said the best outside shooter on their team is Andrew Nicholson until they got Frye. But they've just assembled all of these great athletes who can't shoot. It's a bizarre way to put together a team. I like their draft, in a vacuum. I really like Gordon and I liked Elfrid Payton, but now you're putting them with Oladipo and Tobias Harris and Vucevic, and I don't know. I don't know what you end up with. And then we don't know if that coach is good either. He certainly wasn't good last year. He's my number one candidate to be for the Ty Corbin Award.
Yeah, they're interesting this year. This is year 3 post-White now, and I don't really see any signs that they're going to be significantly better on the court. I mean, they just traded away their veteran, or traded away and then waived Jameer Nelson they waived and a follow they traded away. Their veteran backcourt, Big Baby's gone. I mean, he wasn't all that helpful last year. Probably harmful, but that's a young team, and like Frye's a nice player. Ben Gordon should have been on a minimum salary. I have no idea where that contract came from. Bizarre. I don't know, but it's going to be really weird next year.
The numbers have been absolutely unequivocally bizarre, and I can't make any sense of them. The one thing that the most fascinating free agency, the sneaky under the radar free agency thing that is just got obscured by Carmelo and LeBron and Bosh and all the drama with the big names, is I think Powell is going to OKC. I think that was like pretty much done. And then the Carmelo Lakers thing kind of unfolded, and then he took a step back. But I think OKC side thought it was going to be done, and I think everyone involved with Powell thought it was going to be done. And the Carmelo Lakers thing was a monkey wrench, and now he's got to wait that out and see what happens with that. But just, I mean, nobody would love this more than you, I don't think. Put Powell on that OKC team. What happens?
They become a lot better. I don't know. I mean, their offense becomes a little bit less predictable. I mean, that's going to be interesting because they're still, I mean, are they still going to run the same system and the same plays?
No,
and
they can't.
And how much does, but if they do, how much does just introducing a passer like that at a big man spot just sort of help loosen it up? But he'd be a great, you got to pair Powell with a rim protector at this point in his career. And with Ibaka and Adams, they have two. I mean, Adams is going to be fine at that too. So I think it would be a great fit, but, we'll see.
Moves Durant to small forward. Now you're rolling out, last year in crunch time, you had Derek Fisher. This year, Powell in the Derek Fisher spot. Now you move Durant to small forward. You got Westbrook and Jackson, and you have Ibaka. And I don't see how you can double team Powell with those other four guys out there. I guess maybe you could just leave Reggie Jackson open and hope he misses. But the geometry of it is pretty devastating. Assuming he's 80% what he was 4 years ago, because that's the great mystery, right? We don't know what Powell has left. He's been in the worst possible situation with a coach he didn't like and no point guard and a weird offense, and it was just everything that could go wrong for him went wrong. I'm assuming that he has a lot left in the tank. I might be a sap. I'm a Powell defender, but just in a vacuum, like, holy that would be a good team. Offensively, I think they'd be just ridiculous. You seem less enthused than me, though.
Well, look, he shot 48% last year. He still gets to the line a decent amount. He's a great passer. Like, there's no question he would help their offense. And the interesting thing is their offense in the aggregate is really, really good. I don't know how much help they need, but against really good defenses in the playoffs, every little bit of creativity and unpredictability helps. I think he'd be a lot of fun to watch. And the fit, like, Powell would fit anywhere. That's the thing. And he would have fit great in San Antonio, but now that they have Diaw back, I'm not sure that there's enough minutes for him. Whereas, if you just give him a lot of Perkins minutes, a lot of Collison's minutes, Oklahoma City has plenty of opportunity. I mean, you could even argue they should start him at center or whatever. Just start him with Ibaka. And I don't know what that does to your bench unit, but that should be your A unit is Westbrook, Jackson, Durant, Ibaka, Gasol.
Well, we all know Scotty Brooks doesn't like starting his best five players.
No, he doesn't.
Be a new thing for him. What team are you the most intrigued by right now? Just for what they're capable of.
What they're capable of next season?
No, just like the next 2 weeks.
I'm interested to learn more about what Stan Van Gundy has in mind in Detroit. The Meeks deal was weird, but they have cap flexibility. They've got the three big men who clearly don't go together, and there's been a lot of fire and smoke around, how much those guys like playing with each other. They were tied to Isaiah Thomas in a sign and trade for a while. That didn't really materialize. And no one can figure out what they're doing, but that's a team that I think has interest. Obviously, I'm still interested in what Golden State is going to do with Kevin Love and Gordon Hayward in Utah. I mean, I guess we're now operating under the assumption that they're going to match any offer. And, geez, we've been 15, 20 minutes into this thing. We haven't even talked about the Cleveland Cavaliers and Dan Gilbert's private plane.
I know. I feel like I haven't really read anything solid about that yet. It's tough. I think it would be awesome if he went back. And Miami fans, please don't take that as a you hate Miami thing. I just think it would be a fun basketball story. I'd be excited to watch that team to see him and Wiggins and Kyrie and all the weird pieces they have and David Blatt. And I just think that and him and Gilbert reuniting and what that would mean to the fans. How can you not root for that story? Just as somebody who writes about sports, I'd be all in on that story, you know?
But you don't think it's going to happen. It sounds like you don't believe that there's this there's this very strange like Twitter Cleveland subculture that is like adamant that they all have inside sources that it's a done deal. He's going back to Cleveland, and we're all just saps that to think that perhaps it's not a done deal yet. Somebody
sent me a good email that had like the 23 reasons it's going to happen, but it was like very internet-y, and a lot of it was speculation. It was like reason number 17, they took the article off the website. Reason number 18, Dan Gilbert's plane was in South Beach and Zydrunas Ilgauskas was on it. You know, it was all
he wasn't on the plane. Z wasn't on the plane, it turned out.
Oh, he wasn't? Okay.
No, it turned out he wasn't on the plane.
Who was on the plane? Was anyone on the plane?
I have no idea. Maybe Machine Gun Kelly, that rapper that came with them to the lottery, whoever that is. I don't get it. Maybe he will go. Maybe he will. I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting young nucleus. We know he likes his hometown. It just feels like it's a year or two early. And I think what may be happening with Miami is LeBron may want to just come back for a year with a player option for the second year. I think that may be part of what's happening. And like, how much does that leave Bosh out to dry and Wade out to dry? Can Miami try and strong arm him into coming back for more years? It may be that the delay is not so much that he's undecided as how long can they get him to commit? Because in 2 years, Cleveland is probably going to look like a better situation than Miami.
Yeah. And we're hearing the same stuff. Like, I think it's going to be 2 years with an opt-out after next year. It buys them some time, and it gives Miami one more chance to kind of put the right people around him. What I don't understand, though, is why raise everyone's hopes in Cleveland up if you know that's what you're going to do? Like, put something out that says, look, yeah, I don't know where this Cleveland stuff's coming from, but I'm committed to trying to figure out a way to stay in Miami. I've not thought about any other teams yet. And he's not doing that. And, you know, you could come up with 70 reasons why he's not handling it that way. But to me, the number one reason is I think he wanted Rich Paul to get the spotlight for a week. I don't think anyone knew who Rich Paul was before July 1st. I mean, maybe you knew LeBron changed agents, but nobody really knew, and nobody knows who he is. And it just, the whole thing smacked to me of, I'm going to put Rich front and center for a week. He's going to take the meetings. He's going to be in all the stories. Whatever, it's going to be all Rich Paul. And LeBron has a financial interest in that. Like, he is involved with Rich Paul as a financial partner, and they're trying to build an agency and represent different athletes. And so that's why I think he did it that way. I don't like the way that he led Cleveland on if he never intended to even think about going there. I think that was kind of cruel. Wouldn't you think?
I was going to say, when you said you hadn't read anything solid or whatever, I mean, the most solid thing we have is Windhorst and Stein saying that Rich Paul had met with all these teams, and then Woj at Yahoo following it up by saying essentially Rich Paul and a couple other members of LeBron's inner circle are pushing Cleveland on him, which is an interesting story if it turns out true, and everything Woj reports it turns out true for the most part. Why would they go public with that, or why would someone leak that? Why would LeBron let someone leak that? Is there a communication breakdown? I don't know, but Rich Paul seems to be this sort of central figure in all of this, and I'm not.
And he has an office. He has offices in Cleveland.
Yeah,
maybe it's in his best interest for people in Cleveland to think he pushed LeBron to think about going back, and then his work is done, and then he's in Cleveland this summer, and people say, "Oh. Well, at least you tried, you know. Thanks, man. Thanks for whatever." By the way, sometimes we'll talk about this stuff, and then, you know, somebody will write, like in a blog, like, well, as they discussed, and like, you and I are just speculating right now. I don't know anything, and neither do you, about where LeBron is going and what's going on. We're just talking about the different possible scenarios and possible reasons why things are unfolding this way. I don't know anything. So please, if you're going to write about anything we're talking about, just please put that in all caps. LeBron has kept everything very, very, very close to the vest. And the people in Miami were super duper confident that he was coming back. And then over the weekend, I think that shifted. And for the first time, I think they started to get a little bit worried because I hadn't heard from him in a week. And, you know, they're in this situation with Bosh where what if Bosh just says, I'm going to Houston? Now what? Now you frantically try to get Carmelo. But what if Carmelo says, you know what, I'm going to go to Chicago? Now you have LeBron and Wade. And then what does LeBron do then? The guy wants to win titles. He's not going to win a title if Bosh leaves. So I do think there's some real fear in the Miami side, don't you?
Yeah, and then again, you're right. You know, I make a career out of admitting what I don't know. I have no idea what team LeBron is going to pick. I agree with you that over the weekend, the vibe coming out of Miami was, okay, this is real now. We got to do some stuff. Like, this isn't a fait accompli that he's coming back. But, you know, again, just putting the pieces together, the deals they signed yesterday, to me, you know, everyone laughed at the names, but the structure of the deals spoke very loudly that they are now confident he's coming back, that he's indicated to them he's coming back, because otherwise these deals don't really make a lot of sense. I mean, they make some sense as bargaining chips, I guess, to say here's what we would do, but it seems to me that they're more confident this week.
Or they did them because they're trying to throw people out. You know, they're trying to make it seem like they think he's coming back. But the reality is they structured the deals in a way that if he comes back, it becomes the mid-level and whatever the Danny Granger exception is. But if he doesn't come back and they have a ton of cap space, those deals are structured in a way that they just be contracts. Sure. So really, we don't know. It could go either way. We have no idea. I don't like that. It's weird. I both like it and don't like it. And I thought Brian Curtis did a good job writing about the whole Twitter era and just what this new world of reporting is. But I don't really like to go to Twitter. I never really go ever anymore. But I've been finding myself going back these last few days because I want to make sure that I created this other Twitter account that just has basketball people on it. And I hate the fact that I'm kind of held hostage by everybody else's information that might or might not be true. Like it's, do you like it? I don't like it.
I mean, it's a weird thing where it's like, especially since it unfolds over July 4th when normal people are with their families and not working. And so you try and put yourself in the happy medium where you're with your family, but you're kind of working and you're attached to your devices and you're making calls. But then maybe for an hour you go play with your 2-year-old nephew and you come back. So it's you feel imprisoned by it. You feel like you can't get off your phone for more than 5 minutes because you might get an update on where Dan Gilbert's plane may or may not be flying. And on the flip side, it's going to happen. Like this weird thing where everyone wants to break this story. Yeah. That is there's going to be a press conference about it. It's not a state secret. It's not a story that otherwise would not be broken. And everyone is impatient. Everyone's like, oh, why are they taking so long? And LeBron is probably concerned about his public perception for taking so long. But it's like, I would take a long time. I took a long time to make career decisions. So would you. So would normal people. Nobody
takes a longer time than you. You would have trouble with free agency.
I would not. I would probably sit out a year.
It would take you a year and a half. Yeah, you'd sit out a year as you weighed your options.
I'd be like one of the coaches who sits out a year waiting for more openings to come up. But there is part of me that's like, I don't go to Summer League in Orlando, which is going on right now. I only go to Summer League in Vegas, where I'm going to Vegas in 48 hours and I'm completely unprepared. But I go to Vegas because usually free agency is basically done when you get there. All the big names are over. You can kind of relax. Like there'll be like a Jeremy Lin and an Ashik or something that happens while you're out there. But all the big stuff is gone. And now it's like I could be flying to Vegas and stuff could actually still be happening, which is a weird feeling. But it's fun. At the same time, I see August. August is out there like this oasis. I see it. I can touch it. I can feel it. And there's part of me that just wants to get there.
Yeah, I don't mean to sound like we're complaining. It's just, it's an annoying way to live to just always make sure you have to know what's going on and just to never quite know if something, like even we talked about during this podcast today. We're like, well, what if something happens? Well, what if something happens in the middle of the podcast? Like you're just in fear all the time. I was at the Grantland office yesterday and we were in a couple of meetings, and during one of the meetings, somebody in basketball circles texted me, "Wow." And it's all the text said, "Wow."
Oh, you can't do that.
And I freaking panicked. And I was like, what? And I'm on my iPad in this meeting and I'm going through making sure I'm on hoops hype rumors and I'm on my Twitter account and nothing happened. And I texted him back like, what happened? And it had nothing to do with basketball. It was just some story I heard. No, even like, when. Are you kidding me? You can't text "wow" during July. Like that could mean anything.
You know what that's like? It's like my dad called me about 2 years ago and he was like, Zach, I think the two of us should just go out to lunch man to man. And I was like, wait a second. He left a voicemail saying that. I was like, wait a second. Are you dying? You can't just say something like that. You can't just drop, like, after all these years of being a normal father, you can't just drop a voicemail that's like, I think it's time for the two of us to go out to lunch man to man. You can't do that.
No.
You know what was the worst for that was the lockout. Because
oh my God.
Not only was like I was at a lot of those hotel stakeouts till 3 a.m, not nearly all of them, probably about half. I wasn't one of the poor saps that had to be there all the time. But you did feel like over Thanksgiving and over certain, vacations and stuff, like you literally, it could end any time. And there was just like, it could be any moment where you had to pick up everything and just go. And it's like now during free agency, I don't sleep at night, and it's not because I don't take time off, because I do. I take time off to sleep, but it's like every 2 hours you wake up and check your phone, because if it's 3 a.m. and Carmelo Anthony signed, like you got to start mentally prepping for like, okay, in 3 hours I'm going to write something about Carmelo Anthony. It's a weird thing. And Carmelo Anthony is going to sign anyway. It doesn't matter if you find out right away or you find out 45 minutes later, but it's just, we're all addicted. Technology is slowly killing all of us, I think, basically is the end of the story.
I remember I was at the Olympics in London, and so it's, what is it, like 5-6 hours ahead? And I never got used to the sleep cycle. I was up till like 3 o'clock every night. And I went to bed, and I had to wake up at like 7:45 the next day to finish this mailbag column I was writing. So I went to bed, and somehow in like the 5 hours where I was asleep, the Dwight Howard trade happened. And I woke up, and you do the thing where you wake up and you just kind of look at your phone, make sure nothing crazy happened. And all of a sudden I had all these emails and texts. And I was like, oh God, like, was there an earthquake? What happened? And it was the freaking Dwight Howard trade. And it was the worst way ever to wake up. Because on top of it, Dwight Howard went to the Lakers, which, I'm a Celtic fan. I didn't want that to happen. But yeah, when you wake up and your phone is blown up, and you're kind of disoriented and not awake yet, it's pretty funny. You're like, what's happening? I can't process. My brain's not working yet.
That's the one reason I wouldn't want to live on Pacific time, which is clearly a more efficient time to live on than Eastern time.
Except for the waking up. Yeah.
Except for the fact that the world is already moving by the time you get up.
It's brutal. All right, we got to go. So prediction, Carmelo, LeBron, Bosh.
LeBron and Bosh, everyone comes back. That's my prediction.
Back.
Now.
Wow.
I thought a week ago Melo to the Bulls was more likely, and I still give that a decent chance, but gun to my head, everyone goes back.
I think LeBron and Bosh go back. And I think they pay Bosh the max money because that's the right thing to do. He shouldn't have to take a discount if LeBron's leaving. I think Wade takes a big discount. I think Carmelo ends up on the Bulls, and I don't know how. I just have a feeling. Something's going to happen and either Phil will leverage the sign and trade correctly or something will happen, but I think that's how this ends up. And I know nothing. I'm just saying, like, I just have a feeling. It's just a weird gut feeling. I think that's what happens. If
they kept that whole team together, with the exception of maybe Dunleavy and Heinrich, but if they had Butler and Mirotic and Gibson and Noah, and let's say they sign and trade Boozer or amnesty him or whatever, I mean, that would be a hell of a lot of fun to watch. Just as a neutral fan, I live in New York. It's better for me when the Knicks are good. It's more exciting, but like that would be a mean, mean team.
If you're the Knicks, wouldn't you have to consider taking Boozer if you got both of? Doesn't Chicago have 2 draft picks next year?
They have 2 first rounders. They had 2 this year. Do they have 2 again next year? I can't remember.
Well, whatever.
They have the weird one from Sacramento that may be. And they have a Cleveland one coming up. Yeah, that's a pick swap. So they may or may not. It depends on how Sacramento does. Well, you're the Knicks and you have no assets whatsoever, and you have a ton of cap space coming up, and you're not winning the title this year anyway. Why wouldn't you take Boozer's contract for a year and get the 2 draft picks out of it and just figure it out later if you're going to lose Carmelo? I would do that if I ran the Knicks. All I care about is next summer anyway. Utah paid $24 million in dead salary for 2 first-round picks. The market, getting a pick is expensive. Getting 1 first-round pick is expensive. You get 2 for taking a $17 million salary. That's the way that it might be now. It's expensive to do it. And if I'm Chicago, I do that 100 times out of 100 if I can keep Taj Gibson and get Carmelo. My goal is to keep Taj Gibson and get Carmelo. I don't care about the draft picks.
What
You play
do
in
I
the
care?
East. You play in the
I'm
East. You
East.
get that team. You have a very good chance of going to the finals. I mean that's why you're in the NBA, to go to the finals.
Yeah, and if Rose is back even at 82% of what he was, and I have Carmelo and Taj Gibson and Joakim Noah and McDermott and Mirotic and Butler, like, I'm going to the finals unless LeBron is out of his mind in this series against me. Chuck Klosterman, what's happening?
Not too much.
So you didn't like the LeBron letter. Let's start there.
Yeah, I guess that was a more controversial opinion than I realized.
It was controversial.
Well,
I didn't even know.
Well, I was back in North Dakota, and Chris Ryan contacts me, and he says, "Hey, we're doing this thing on should the Cavs trade for Love, and keep Wiggins. Do you want to write something about this? Because we'd been texting about it ourselves, just kind of, anecdotally." So I didn't really have internet access at my mom's house, so I just kind of wrote this thing on my phone, and I sent it in, and then like 4 hours later, not thousands, many people seem to have noted on Twitter that I had made this thing about not liking the LeBron letter, which I'm surprised that so many people thought it was great. I'm just sort of shocked by it, but I guess that's just how the world is.
So, yeah, I thought it was classy. I don't think it was the best thing I ever read in my life, and it was definitely a little bit contrived. But what did you not like about it?
A whole bunch of stuff. I mean, first of all, let me start by saying I'm glad LeBron is in Cleveland. I wanted him to go to the Cavs. But okay, remember how when the decision happened, everybody was like, how terrible this is. Well, this is the same thing. It's just that people liked the message. It's a guy using mainstream media essentially to put out his PR message. It was a completely constructed thing. There was like, it's odd how just because the sentiment was different, people were just falling over themselves about how wonderful it was. Also, I mean, didn't it sort of seem to imply that this was a non-basketball decision, that he was just going to make this decision based on his love of Northeast Ohio? But that's patently untrue. I mean, if Kyrie Irving would have ripped his Achilles in the last week of the season, and the Cavs would end up having, say, the 9th pick in the lottery instead of the 1st pick, do you think he would go to Cleveland?
I thought during Game 5 of the finals, I specifically remember thinking to myself, it's going to be hard for this guy to go back to this specific team. Now, at the time, I thought they were going to make a whole bunch of changes. I thought Wade and Bosh were going to take less money. I thought they were going to be able to add like a 4th, not an all-star, but maybe the next level down from that, and add a couple bench guys. And I really think what happened is that first couple days of free agency, the contracts were just crazy. And it became quickly clear to Miami and everybody else that they weren't going to be able to get the big pieces that they really needed to accompany those 3 guys. And I think at that point, that's when he started to check out. And the Josh McRoberts, Danny Granger was a Hail Mary, and when you have this guy talking about he wants to fix the roster. We got to make this roster better. We got to do this and that. And all they can come up with is Josh McRoberts and Danny Granger. Like, at that point, I really thought there was a chance he was going to leave.
Well, I'm not surprised he left. I'm not questioning that he wanted to go back to Cleveland. I think he did want to go back to Cleveland, but it had to do with sort of the letter itself and the way that it just, to me, plays into the worst provincial tendencies of local fan bases. I mean, everybody is from someplace. He could have went to Phoenix, right? The letter somehow suggests that, well, in Northeast Ohio, nothing is given, everything is earned. Whereas I guess in Phoenix, they would just give you a job and just give you a life. Like, it's just an easy. I think everybody is from someplace, right? Everybody in America, people in Las Vegas who were raised there, think of it as a place where you have to earn it to make it. Nothing just easy, even though it's all based around the idea that you can make money fast. Every place is somewhere, and it means something to different people. It just seems really strange to me when he kind of decides that, well, I did this thing before, and I betrayed all these people, and they hated me, and I just need them to like me. I mean, in some ways, LeBron reminds me a little bit of Bruce Springsteen. He just needs people to love him so badly.
Oh, wow.
And he has this real, like, I know people are going to say this is a cynical take, but I think in some ways it's almost more cynical to say, hey, if I just say that this place I came from is different because that's where I learned to crawl, and they're just going to suddenly decide we're going to forgive everything and we're going to love you again. And of course, he was just totally right. It's just like he was told, like it does show that his understanding of marketing is just, kind of next level. But I don't like things like this. I also think that it kind of illustrates how, the fan base for the NBA now is much more informed, and like it's much more sophisticated. You get these guys who want to talk about metrics and analytics all day, and I think the average basketball fan now feels that they have to have this kind of like this hyper awareness of what's going on in the court, and yet they still want to believe aphorisms. They still want to believe when someone says, oh, Cleveland is different. This is a unique situation. I went to Miami to pursue my dreams, and then somehow, even though I'd lived in this one place my whole life, by being away from there for 4 years, I now realize that I must live there. And then the letter also kind of suggested that part of the reason he was doing it is sort of to help economic development in the area, to make other people want to stay in Cleveland. I just thought it was crazy. I mean, like I say, I'm glad he's in Cleveland. Of all the places he could have went, that's where I was hoping he would go. But I don't like things like that letter.
You make some strong points. I love the LeBron Springsteen comparison. Do you think LeBron's going to release a song about this is going out to the factory people in the factories that do factory stuff?
It definitely appeals to that sort of base, this idea that I am going to make you feel better about what your life is like by sort of taking on the persona of somebody who longs to be like you, to have this experience that you're having that might seem difficult, but actually I'm going to convince you it's great.
I'm coming back to Cleveland, and now the river. So LeBron, I think you touched on one key point here. Well, two key points, actually. One, he doesn't leave Miami when he does unless he feels like that team is going south, which I wrote right after it happened. Two, he doesn't go to Cleveland unless that team has a lot of assets that he can actually win with. Now, let's say they win one of the last four lotteries instead of three of the last four. Let's say they have the 10th pick of the draft instead of the first pick last year. Let's say they ended up with Noah Vonleh at number 9 instead of Andrew Wiggins. And let's say he looks at that whole big picture and says, wow, I have no chance of winning a title next year. I think he rides it out with Miami one more year. I think he was always going back. I don't think he was going back this soon. And I really do believe that they promised him they were going to get Kevin Love, because I think there's something to those guys being left out of the letter, Wiggins and Bennett. I think it's not a coincidence that now 2 weeks later, or a week and a half later, those are the two people in the Kevin Love trade. And I know I love conspiracies a little too much, and I'm always trying to look into stuff and flip rocks over and do everything I do. That's one of the things I like about being a sports fan. I have fun with the stuff. But I wouldn't be shocked. Repeat, I would not be shocked if they had already agreed on this Kevin Love deal and they agreed to wait 2 weeks and then do the deal 2 weeks after LeBron signed, just so it didn't look like he was signing there and one of the conditions was they had to get Kevin Love. I predict that Kevin Love ends up in Cleveland and Wiggins and Bennett will be in the trade. And I don't totally think it's a coincidence that they weren't in the letter. What do you think of that?
That's very possible. I mean, I guess if I had to put money down, I agree. I do think Love is going to end up there. I see today there was a report that like the Bulls are sort of now in the running for Kevin Love. But what the Bulls are offering is not a fraction. I mean, what the Cavs are putting up there is pretty good. I mean, by the end of last year, Bennett was starting to look okay.
Yeah, before he got hurt, I think he has a chance. I don't think he's going to be a multi-all-star, but I think he's going to be an above-average NBA player. He's still only 21, I think.
Exactly. And Wiggins is tough. And both those guys are Canadian too, aren't they?
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting combination. I'm not saying they're going to become buddies just because they're both from Canada, but I just kind of think that's an interesting detail.
They know each other.
Yeah, they do know they're going to play on the Canadian national team together.
Your favorite team, the team you're rooting for in the Olympics. You're all in on the Canadian national team. I do think, though, I really do think LeBron is a genius to some extent, and I just think he would look at the big landscape of playing with Kyrie Irving and Wiggins together, and his little, sophisticated basketball computer brain would just think about the spacing and how much trouble he'd have offensively against really good defensive teams. I'm not sure you can have both guys.
Wouldn't you prefer to see LeBron just do it with the team they have now, though? Let's see how great he is. He's definitely the best player in the league.
Yeah.
He's certainly the best player since Jordan. He arguably could become I guess the second best player of all time. I want to see him do it with these guys. I don't want him to keep shuffling things around to make sure he's on TV in June. I just want him to do it, and I like the idea of it kind of being a one-man team where he does everything, where he scores 32 and he leads them in assists and he gets 9 boards a night and he shuts down people and he plays 41 minutes a game. I mean, I want to see this happen. I'm not looking for the long-term trajectory of his career. What would be better? How many minutes he should be playing if he wants to play, into his late 30s or whatever. I just kind of want to see him go out and do it. And I just wish that he would have been like, I'm going back to Cleveland. Let's see what happens.
Right. And I don't think they should do any trade until January. I think they should see how good Wiggins is with them. I think it'd be crazy to trade him now. And I think that Love deal is going to be sitting there. No, that Minnesota is not going to trade Love if they know they can get Bennett Wiggins. Now the risk would be if Wiggins came out and was a disaster and he shot 29% for the first 3 months or something, and then this whole storyline came out, can Wiggins shoot or not? But the thing that I'm excited for, and I wanted this Cleveland thing to happen for a lot of reasons. I wanted LeBron to be on a really fun young team where he could play a whole bunch of different positions and kind of do his thing. I thought the shame of what happened last year in Miami, and then to a lesser extent the year before, although that team was really good, they just didn't run. And you had LeBron who had to have the ball all the time because, as Wade kind of moved into a different phase of his career, and LeBron, you saw it in those last 2 rounds, like LeBron had to handle the ball all the time. And you don't get to see him on the wing. You don't get to see him post up as much. He has all these different parts of his game, and he wasn't getting to use all of them. So I'm excited to see him on Cleveland, especially if they're running, because you forget this, but he is the most devastating guy in a fast break. He's the best. He's the guy you want on the wing.
He seems like he's the fastest guy in the league. I mean, if you actually lined up all the dudes in the league and had them run, I don't know who's faster. I guess this Dante Exum is supposed to be extremely fast. Is that?
I was talking to my friend Hershey about this, about who is the fastest ever, just in person watching somebody go from, let's say, the top of the key all the way to the other basket. Mm-hmm. LeBron's in the top 3 or 4 ever. The guy who was underrated in this discussion was David Robinson. Robinson was like a gazelle. I mean, it was just, and the thing is, and especially earlier LeBron, he could go, I swear to God this is true. He could go from midcourt to the rim in 3 steps. And you would think what just happened? How did somebody do that? And that he was just on that level, and there's only been a couple guys like that.
And in basketball, it's kind of hard to gauge because the floor is only
94 feet.
94 feet, and these guys are long striders. So it just always felt to me that whenever I saw LeBron take off, he looked more like a wide receiver than a basketball player compared to the other guys.
Right. Who was just flipping for a second? We always have this discussion when the World Cup comes around, and now soccer fans are America's sophisticated enough about soccer that we don't usually think this way anymore. But it's still fun to think about. What basketball player do you wish had played soccer from age 4 on right now?
Allen Iverson.
No, playing in the league right now, because Allen Iverson was the last answer.
That was the last answer.
Allen Iverson was the 2006 answer.
Okay,
LeBron was the 2010 answer. So who's the 2014 answer?
Well, Let me
You
think.
get him at 4 years old, and you're putting him in one of those like LA Galaxy junior programs, and all he's doing is he's a soccer machine from that point.
And we're not picking a goalie. A lot of these guys could be awesome goalies, I think. We're talking about a player who'd be on the pitch. As they
Sean
say.
Marion was the 2006 goalie choice. I remember thinking, oh my God, the Matrix in goal. The 2006 Sean Marion would have been unbelievable. But no, we're not picking a goalie.
Yeah, well, okay. Give me your answer as I'm thinking here. I'm trying to.
My
come
answer, I really feel good about this one. I feel like he's the runaway pick, and if we took a poll of America, I feel like this guy would win.
Oh, wait a second, Rondo.
Oh, Rondo's interesting. Like Rondo is like a midfielder?
Yeah, well, because he's got he's got the long limbs, and he's really kind of deft, and he's really smart, and I feel like he would have a good sense of the flow of the game.
Mine is Russell Westbrook. I think Russell Westbrook would be, because incredible athlete, like really one of the 4 or 5 best athletes in the league right now. B, one of the fastest guys in the league. He's in the top 2 or 3. C, super physical. People just bounce off him. He's always finishing. Like he's this force of nature type guy. And then 4, on top of everything else, he doesn't get tired. I think the legacy of Russell Westbrook these last couple years is just, the guy is a machine. You know, him and LeBron are the 2 people, and LeBron gets cramps sometimes, so you know he's human. Westbrook, he'll be in the overtime of some playoff game, and he's still flying around like a maniac, and you're like, how is this guy doing this?
Yeah, he's like a good answer, I guess. He might be the best tailback, too. I mean, there's probably a lot of any kind of outdoor sport we're talking about. He may be a great rover for softball. If there was a fast-pitch softball league.
Center fielder? Yeah. You're right. There's probably any sport he played from age 4 on, he would have been awesome at. I feel like he has every single trait I'd want from an awesome athlete. Although I don't know, golf maybe wouldn't have been good for him. He's too much energy.
Yeah, it's hard to gauge when you take a sport like basketball, who would be the best golfer. You end up, for some reason, unconsciously like picking like
white guys?
Like a white jump shooter. I know that's like a real sort of unconsciously racist move.
I would think Rondo would have been a great golfer.
Yeah, probably. Although sometimes he kind of gets in mental funks, though. And such a mental game, you know. You need somebody who's not going to get distracted or or get down on himself, you know.
Like Kobe? Just like you could see Kobe like trapped behind a tree thinking like, I'm hitting this 2-iron and it's going through those 7 branches and I'm getting on the green right now.
He'd practice constantly in all kind of conditions.
He would. He should have played golf or tennis because he's a singular athlete. He's not somebody that really ever needed teammates. He was always kind of good on his own. His teammates just kind of had to coexist with whatever he wanted to do.
He is probably more designed for to be an individual athlete.
I've written about this before. I feel like it was almost a mistake. He should have been in an individual sport. He should have been like a baseball pitcher. Something where he controlled his environment and he didn't have to rely on people like Smush Parker.
I'd maybe feel that way if he was 6'2". But I mean, like when you're 6'6" to begin with, it's like, you know, why not pursue that?
Could he have been a quarterback?
Yeah,
probably would have been too demanding. I think he would have yelled at everybody too much.
Yeah, sometimes that works. How
much further do I have to go to get emails from Laker fans saying that I use this podcast as an opportunity to rip on Kobe as usual? Who, by the way, I think is the 8th best player of all time. Before you bring that up to me.
Yeah, well, it seems like you were just complimenting him here. What was the?
Yeah, I think his will to win is up there with just about anyone I've ever seen.
And it is amazing now that it looks like that his desire to win and like his tenacity and competitiveness is going to be the main thing people remember about him, which did not seem possible not too many years ago. That middle of his life and the middle of his career, we're just going to sort of almost totally not forgive, but just kind of forget. It just doesn't seem to come up anymore.
I was looking at this. So Wade's played 11 years. And if you look at Kobe through 11 years, so now we're heading into the 2007-2008 season, which is the year they traded for Gasol and made the finals and all that stuff. Wade is basically the same amount of NBA miles on him that Kobe has. during those first 11 years. Wade is now clearly moving to a different phase of his career. Kobe at that point, he was available for a trade. Nobody knew like what his shelf life was going to be. Like the Lakers, I think had just gotten swept in the playoffs. They barely made the playoffs. He was clearly one of those guys that couldn't carry a team by himself to 55 games like somebody like LeBron, 55 wins like somebody like LeBron. But then he had this whole last third of his career from 08 finals, 09 title, 2010 title, 2011 they got knocked out, but he had a good season. Then 2012, the year he blew out his Achilles, that was the year when I think it was like 17 years into his career and he was averaging 29 a game or whatever he was. So these extra 5 years that we kind of weren't totally expecting. And yet with Wade, I think there's a 0% chance that'll happen. My point is Wade's first 11 years versus Kobe's first 11 years are much more even than I think people realize. Just from points, rebounds, titles, all NBAs. Like you go on down the line, it's really even. It was those last 5 years that made Kobe's career what it was. Does that make sense?
I agree with you, although, and while I am 100% certain that if we put the statistics up on a computer screen, you would be right. I guess I never felt they were equal. There was no, like from watching them, there was never a point, even when Wade was at his absolute apex and basically carried into that title over Dallas kind of by himself. If someone had said, which of these guys do you want in your team? I think I still would have taken Kobe Bryant. Maybe my reasoning is bad because I'm not sort of using numbers. I'm just sort of using my sense of the game and what I'm watching. But they didn't seem that equal to me.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Wade's 2009 season is actually better than any season Kobe's ever had in his career.
I'm sure statistically that's true. I
but
no
even
doubt
like what he did with that team, 30 points a game, 7.5 assists, 5 rebounds, 49% shooting. His PER was 30.4. It's in the 30s. Took this crappy Miami team. I mean, the Miami team was we always talk about, Kobe, he was on those bad teams. That 09 Miami team, when they were already clearing space ahead of time for whoever, here's who was on that team. Chalmers, Udonis Haslem, Michael Beasley, Daquan Cook. They traded Sean Marion for Jermaine O'Neal, I think. Joel Anthony, Chris Quinn, Jamal McGlure, Yakwaba Diarra. I mean, that's an absolute 1 out of 10 for a supporting cast. And he took them to 43 wins, and they lost in 7 in round 1 to Atlanta. But the point is, I think Wade, you could really make a case. I'm with you. I think Kobe was probably resonated a tiny bit more. But statistically, they're right there, and yet Wade is going on the downside. What do you expect from Wade these next few years?
Well, okay, you'll know this more than I. Is the expectation now he's going to be in Miami? Did he sign? Is it all set? I'm not even sure. I've kind of been out of
He did something that I can't ever remember happening before. He opted out of 2 years, $41.5 million, and signed a 2-year deal for $34 million.
Well, so he is going to be, I guess, probably just maybe a lesser version of the player he has been over the last 5 years, with maybe a slight amplification of his numbers because he will need to shoot more and he will need to score more.
So you're 70.
I think he's definitely on the other side, right?
Yeah,
There's no question. I mean, I'm not saying anything bombastic by recognizing that he's sort of on the down. You know, if he were to go, if he would have went to a team, a really strong team, where he would have been the third best player. Yeah. I think that he could have paid really big dividends and might have often been the best player in the last 4 minutes of the game, but I guess he's choosing to do otherwise.
So you're 78 years old. You're living on some ranch in North Dakota, and your little grandson's sitting on your lap, and he's like, "Papa, what was it like to watch Dwayne Wade?" What do you say?
I would probably talk about him at Marquette because I would want my kid to know that college basketball mattered. And I would say he also had an NBA career. I guess if you're interested in that, he made a lot of money. But, when he took it, when he was a senior at Marquette, that was really something. It was really inspiring. I was thrilled to have experienced that, And then I would start telling the kid maybe to look into attending Marquette at some point,
How did the NBA turn into a 12-month sport? I have no idea. We will talk football starting next week. I am still doing my research. I am going to be the most prepared for the 2014 NFL season than I've been at any point since the 1960s. So get ready for that. But we're going to wait a week. I still need to prepare more. Right now we're going to talk NBA because a lot going on. The ubiquitous Brian Windhorst. How are you?
Have you made a football bet yet? Because I have.
Oh, wow, we're going to football. What was your football bet?
I was in Vegas last week, and I made a very sad but profitable annual tradition when I bet the Browns under.
That's like going on the don't come line in craps where you bet against the table. I like it.
Every year in Summer League or Team USA, every year it's 5.5, 6 or 6.5, and every year they go 5-11, and every year it's free money.
This year especially, it looks pretty good because they have the quarterback controversy. You can never go wrong going against the Browns. I was in Cleveland last week for the Collectors Convention, and let's just say that there's LeBron mania in Cleveland. You can kind of feel it. You tweeted yesterday, I think you tweeted this. The information came from you that LeBron lost a bunch of weight this summer. What's going on?
Yeah, he's down. He hasn't weighed himself. I think it's one of the things he doesn't want to know just yet, but I've heard he's estimated about 10 or 12 pounds down now. And I guess he has cut out carbs. Last year, Ray Allen, as if Ray Allen needed anything to help with his body, he went paleo in the offseason. He said he can't really do it during the season because just how much running and stuff they do, but he went paleo in the offseason and lost some weight. And Ray Allen came to training camp, he was like the only Heat guy who was in better shape at the start of last training camp than at the end of the season, because those guys enjoyed their second championship. And Wade and LeBron especially. LeBron was probably coming off of his wedding and everything. He was probably, quote unquote, worst shape he's been in a while. He was obviously fine, but he got off to a slow start last season, and his back was bothering him early on. And so he and Dwayne Wade both have gone to this, sort of, I don't know if LeBron's terming it paleo, but he's basically gone without carbs. And, he tweeted a photo. I knew about it, but when he tweeted a photo of himself yesterday, you could really tell on his face that he dropped some weight. So I expect to see a thinner LeBron James when he shows up in a Cavs uniform.
Yeah, if you're dropping carbs and you're eating better, that could be worth 12 pounds, especially for 6'8". That makes sense to me.
And Bill, he's actually been in the mid 260s and sometimes over 270 in his career, and it's he's actually he doesn't like talking about it. And if you'll know, I don't even know what they list him as. I think they made a list him at 250, but he, I think, has been a little self-conscious about that over the recent years. So I think there's a secondary reason as well.
I'm looking that up as we talk. I heard, just from inside scuttlebutt, I heard he was up to 280, which makes sense. You think all right, they list him as, I don't know if he was 280 last year, but I've heard so he's listed at 250 on the website. But when you think about how big he is and how much muscle he has, 270 seems realistic. The guy who really needed to lose weight was Wade. I just thought he looked doughy last year. He was not in shape, and certainly it caught up to them in the playoffs. So has that, from what you know, has that ever been a guy who's taken himself seriously in the off season?
Yeah, he actually did last off season. He started working with Tim Grover again, and I think there was actually a little bit of a divide. The Heat wanted Dwayne to lose a bunch of weight during the last offseason to lighten the load on his knees. And in fact, Pat Riley mentioned that at the end of the year, Dwayne's going to drop some weight. And then he actually came to camp after working to build weight. He actually was trying to build some muscle with Grover. And so he went the other direction. And I think during the season, he had so many periods where he was shut down, missing long stretches. He would just go weeks without playing sometimes. I actually think he got in worse shape as the season went along, which is hard to do. But, you also have the Heat, putting shackles on you a little bit. So definitely by the end of the year, I think he realized he was getting too heavy, and he made it a priority to trim down this offseason, going a different direction. And
do you think
that's one of Riley's big things? Riley's a big, you have to get lighter as you get older. That's one of his things.
How much insight can you give us on Riley and LeBron? Because I've heard a little bit of scuttlebutt. I don't think there's bitterness or anything, but that relationship might have run its course in a lot of ways. What have you heard about that?
Yeah, well, I don't think that LeBron was ever very close to Riley, and I don't think that's a departure from the way he likes to treat management. He sort of treats management in text relationships. He's open to communicating with them, but he keeps them at arm's length. He's never going to be a guy like Dirk with Cuban. It's just not going to ever be his style unless he really changes. And so I think Riley tried to do his bonding maneuvers over the years, and I don't think that they worked. And I really, at the end, I really wonder how much Riley understood LeBron, because when he came out and made that fiery speech at the end of the season, that is not somebody who has a good vibe that would think LeBron would react well to that. And
right.
I've mentioned this before, and I don't think LeBron left because of that speech or anything, and I don't think this was a big deal, but I just think it's a window into what he understands about LeBron. He just announced during that speech that LeBron was expecting a daughter, and LeBron had gone to lengths to keep that quiet. He did not want that out there, and several times he was asked in the media about it. He said, "I'm not talking about that." And anybody who spent any time around LeBron knew that he was keeping that quiet. I think there was some concern through the media that he may need to leave the team in the playoffs. The child is not. His wife is still pregnant. She's not due for a little while yet. But it just that he would say that sort of an indication that he didn't really know LeBron and know that he was keeping that a secret. I mean, it's not relevant, but it was just a little window that if he had spent time around him and was really that close to him, he would know that he was keeping that private. So I really question how close they ever were. For every, and I am just as guilty as everybody. I like the story of how Riley, put the rings out on the desk in the presentation. And, there's also a story about how Alonzo Mourning cried, talking about the support the team showed him when he had his kidney problems. Although I will point out that they let Alonzo walk in free agency after that. But anyway, I don't think that's why he went to Miami. He went to Miami to play with Dwayne Wade and Bosh. I think the Riley thing was a factor, and certainly you believe in him, and he's a guy who gets things done. But I do not think that that Riley was the guy who won him over. I think Dwayne Wade was the guy who won him over.
Yeah, I don't think any of this stuff was a tipping point, but it does seem like there were a couple subtle things that maybe didn't help Miami's case, right? Like you had the Wade plan that LeBron had to have signed off on. Hey, we're only going to play Wade 50 to 54 games, and we're going to need to carry us in the other games. Didn't work. I'm sure he was a little bit perturbed about that. The fact that they didn't spend money, them amnestying Mike Miller, I don't think they realized that he was going to take it that personally. And then, the speech, I get what Riley was saying. I actually agree with him in a lot of ways. I think he was looking at it like, when the Lakers in 1984, when we lost to the Celtics in Game 7, like the whole team didn't splinter. We didn't quit. We regrouped. We came back the next year, and we lost in 86, and we regrouped, and we came back in 87 and 88. And I think that was his mindset. He was trying to say, look, you can't win every year. You're going to go through some adversity. This is the time when you find out what you're made of. I don't think he realized that, LeBron from his end was just looking at it like, can I win ever with these guys again? You look at the Lakers in the mid-'80s. They had so much talent. They were always in the game. But with what we saw last year from that Miami team, I think once the role player prices went up in the first week of July, that kind of sealed their fate. Do you think there's any chance they could have won again with the team they had?
I'll tell you, seeing what the Bulls have put together, I wouldn't be picking them if LeBron stayed. Let's say they had McRoberts and Danny Granger, and LeBron had re-signed, I'd probably still be leaning towards the Bulls. Although I think they'd have a decent chance because they got the best player. I remember you and I were talking during the finals a couple of years ago that I just didn't see this as a dynasty. I just felt like the 2011 CBA changed the game so dramatically, and I didn't see it sticking together. I didn't see LeBron leaving this fast, but I didn't feel like they could restock the team. I felt like when Battier and Ray Allen and Mike Miller went out to pasture, that they couldn't replenish those guys, and that they would have a trouble keeping their head above water. And that's what essentially was happening. LeBron hastened it by leaving, but they had sort of expired, and just because of the rules, and just in fairness to them, they didn't have the opportunity to combat that. I really think that the seeds of their long-term undoing happened the day after the first decision. The day after the first decision, the Heat traded 6 draft picks. They traded 2 first-round picks to Toronto, 2 to Cleveland. I think they also traded 2 second-round picks to Cleveland. And they also later traded another first-round draft pick on draft night to Philadelphia. And so they basically gave away all of those mechanisms to develop players. Even if you are drafting 26, 27, 28, I mean, you can still get some young guys that you can grow. And they didn't do that. They only had 1 first-round draft pick the whole time LeBron was there, Norris Cole, and he ended up being a nice role player, and they really could have used a couple more. And they went to the 4 straight finals and got to 2 titles. It was hardly a failure. It worked. But if they'd have known the way the league was going to go, they would have just told LeBron and Bosh, look, we're not doing sign and trade. You're just going to have to sign here for what it is. But they got, to be honest with you, they got rushed because they wanted to do that party. I know this sounds weird, but they wanted to do that party, and they had to have the guys signed to do it.
That's funny.
So they rushed their way to get those deals done, and they just gave away the first-round picks and said, whatever.
And I also don't think they thought Wade was going to deteriorate like he did, because if you look at, I think I wrote about this a few weeks ago, like the first 10 years of his career versus Kobe's first 10 years, the numbers are pretty similar. They're almost dead even from the points, assists, rebounds. But Kobe had that kind of second prime from 08 to 11 when he made the finals 3 times and was able to kind of reinvent his game and stay as durable as he had been during his early peak. Whereas Wade kind of went the other way and never really had a plan B for the aging process. Plus his body's, I think, in different shape than Kobe's was. But if you were looking at it 4 years ago from, all right, we have LeBron during his entire prime, and we have Dwayne Wade, who's going to be one of the best 3 or 4 2 guards of all time, we'll be fine. We'll figure out the rest. I don't think they kind of banked on the fact that Wade was going to deteriorate like that. I'm not saying he's a bum or anything, but he's certainly not a top 15 guy anymore.
That's true.
Do you think – I mean, even in 2012 – he was still able to get to top 7, top 8 Dwayne Wade level. But do you see any scenario where he gets to the top 8 or top 9 again?
Well, I do think you're going to see his numbers rebound pretty strongly because he's going to have the ball in his hands. And there were certainly plenty of periods during this last season where he looked really good. I remember actually talking to Tim Grover. He looked pretty good. It's easy to forget now, but he looked awfully good during the conference finals at times. And I remember talking to Tim Grover, and I was just like, boy, this plan looks like it might have worked. And he's like, well, we really just plotted this for these 2 series, for conference finals and finals. And, we're trying to make it work. There were moments where he did look pretty good. And so I actually think, he will have some days in the sun. He will have some games where he will put up big numbers and he looks great. And he's got that runner working, and he'll pump fake guys and gets the line, 16 times, and he'll have 30-point games and everything. And he'll certainly beat his chest and say, I told you I wasn't done. But his
Right.
ability to do that night in and night out throughout the course of a season and throughout the course of an entire playoffs, I think those days are in the past. And if you hooked him up to a lie detector, I think he would say that too.
Year 12 for him, and he also had the 3 years in college. You followed LeBron his entire career. You saw him in high school. I thought one of the tragedies, not a tragedy, but a basketball tragedy last year, was just that team was so limited. They could only really use him. He had to basically handle the ball all the time. And because he's never really played with a good guard other than Wade, we never got to see him on the wing ever. We never got to see him running fast breaks, and he's the most devastating guy in the league on a fast break on the wing. Never got to see it last year. That team really didn't run. Do you think that played? Because I even wrote this in the column I wrote after. I really think that the lack of I guess malleability with that team was one of the reasons he wanted to go to Cleveland. Don't you feel like he wants to do all types of things on a basketball court and not just be the guy who dribbles the ball up?
Yeah, you've hit on something that's interesting because one of the things, a year ago right now, I thought there was a chance that the Cavs could get LeBron.
Yeah.
Because I didn't think the Heat were going to have a great year or at least win again, and I thought the Cavs were going to have a good year. I compared the Cavs to the Warriors from the year before, where they sort of emerged with their young players, and then all of a sudden they were in the game for Dwight Howard and got Andre Iguodala. That's what I sort of saw as a possibility. Then the Cavs went in the tank and still got him anyway. But at that time, LeBron had never played with a ball-dominating guard, and I actually wondered how he would fit with Kyrie Irving. And actually, LeBron's relationship with Kyrie had gone a little bit south. He had invited him to work out with him in Ohio, and I'm sure there's an explanation, and I don't have it, but Kyrie didn't do it. Maybe he had a really good reason. Maybe he had some of the commitment. I know that he'd gone to Duke in the summers to do some classes. Maybe that was some of it. But so they actually chilled a little bit a year ago or so, and there was an idea that if LeBron was going to go back to the Cavs, maybe they would be better off moving Kyrie for a guy who fit better because LeBron's going to have the ball in his hands.
Yeah.
So for him to do this, I mean, he's making a pretty gigantic career pivot here because he's going to a team that is not ready to win. I mean, they may end up with a load of talent, but they're going to have a whole bunch of growing pains to go through. I mean, the star players on the team with him are going to have not played in a single playoff game, and their coach, while he's an extremely veteran coach, will have never coached in a playoff series. And if I'm not mistaken, the David Blatt, with all his championships, those are all single elimination tournaments they play over in Europe. Those are not series, and there's a whole art to coaching through a series. And
well, hold on. If you go even further than that, Kyrie's never played in a big game in college or pros. Not one. Not one playoff game. Not anything.
Right. And Kevin Love's never played in a playoff game. And, I mean, it looks like they're going to have some really nice veteran guys off the bench who have rings.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, my point is that this is not a championship-ready team. This is not like the team he went to in Miami, which was a completely championship organization. So for him to go there to say, all right, I'm going to sort of put the idea of racking up championship numbers on the back burner here while I sort of build up a team, and I'm going to go play for a coach who's never coached in the league before, and I'm going to go play with a ball-dominating guard who I've never played with any time in my career before. It's a pretty big pivot for him, and I just think that illustrates that beyond everything, beyond any speech, beyond any transaction the Heat made, beyond much, is that LeBron really just wanted to go back and play in Cleveland because this situation is intriguing, but it is not as ideal as it was when he went to Miami.
Can I give you this working theory?
Please.
He didn't see enough in Miami to put it this way. There was no way to guarantee that he was winning a title in Miami or even make the finals. He didn't want to put the kind of miles and minutes on his body again that he did last season to drag really an average to below average supporting cast to try to do and to just get smoked in the finals again or whatever round. He wasn't ready to go to Cleveland yet. Probably in his head was thinking 2015 or 2016 was when he'd go back.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
don't you feel like that finals and just his whole experience kind of sped it up?
Yeah, I mean, I just kept cautioning everybody. I saw everybody in Miami making the same mistake that I had made in Cleveland. in 2010, because remember that Cavs team won 62 games and went through the first round 4-1 and got up on the Celtics 1-0, and everybody was saying, and even I was writing, it looks like he's back. He gives this passionate speech about Akron when he wins that MVP award in 2010. Yeah. Everybody thinks he's back, and what happened was the season just absolutely veered off course and went into the can. And so this whole time, I just kept saying, just let's see what everything looks like at the end of June. Let's see what everything looks like at the end of June. And I know that the Heat looked really good as they, moved their way through the playoffs. And Wade, had good moments. But I just said, you got to see what the score is when the buzzer rings, because all that matters is the way he feels at the end of June. And even in that finals, when we left San Antonio, when it was 1-1, and, I saw that there was a reasonable chance it could have been 2-0 if the temperature in the building wasn't 90 degrees. I thought that the Heat were in pretty good position, and the Spurs just absolutely, completely de-pantsed them, so to speak, and showed all of their flaws. And that was what LeBron walked away with looking at. And I just think that was the defining factor, just like the Celtics completely, exposed the Cavs back in 2010, although LeBron was a big factor of that. It also exposed the supporting cast. And I think the way those two seasons ended, and the fact that the Cavs got an incredible break that night. I'll never forget the night in Indianapolis when the Cavs win the lottery. I know you were in Indianapolis because they caught you on TV.
Yeah, I got caught. Yeah, I took a little heat the next day because he came out so strange after that lottery. And I just remember thinking to myself, boy, this is weird. He's really playing weird. Like, I've seen LeBron a lot in person. It was one of the weirder LeBron performances in the first half. And I mentioned at halftime, I was like, he just came out really strangely. Like, but part of me wondered, was he affected by them winning the lottery? I wasn't saying that was the reason, but it was like, hey, I wonder if those two are correlated or there's a correlation. Now you got to think, don't you feel like there might have been a correlation, or am I crazy?
I'd love to talk with him about it. It would probably have to be privately. But that little bit of luck.
From what we know about him, though, he's one of those people, like, he has to literally shut off all the switches heading into a game, right? Like, he doesn't go on social media. He puts his headphones on. He reads a book. He does everything possible to just focus on the game. And clearly he's had a problem with being distracted going to games. And he's learned how to basically, if you've ever seen For Love of the Game with Costner, clear the mechanism. He clears all the mechanisms and goes out. Now, if somebody told him, hey, the Cleveland won the lottery, tough to clear that mechanism if in the back of your mind you're thinking you might go there next year. So I do wonder, even if it sounds weird, I do wonder if that threw him off.
He's one of the most highly aware guys I've ever been around, aware of his surroundings, aware of everything. So I don't know. I don't know if one equals the other, but there's no doubt in my mind he's aware. By the way, I want to tell a quick story about your TV reactions and how they're funny. This is just a quick aside. On draft night this year, we assembled a little war. I told you about this. We assembled a little war room in Bristol.
Yep.
And the cool thing about in Bristol is you get all the raw feeds. You can get, everywhere we've got a camera on. So we had this bank of televisions, and we had, your broadcast on one, and we had Joel Embiid's house on the other. And we had the Boston Celtics war room and the Kings war room. We had cameras in those war rooms. Now, we couldn't hear, obviously. It was shut off, but we could see in them. And there was always a bit of a delay because their pick had been in for 10 minutes by the time you actually announced it on air. And when they took that young kid, so we had you side by side with the Celtics war room. And when the Celtics took that young kid that you liked so much, and they caught you with the fist bump on air, you could watch the Celtics. They were in the locker room, I guess, either at their arena or at Waltham. They'd set up their tables and their computers in the war room. You could see them hilariously react to seeing. Oh,
that's great.
It was a hilarious moment.
I obviously didn't know I was going to be on TV for that, but it was pretty funny. I really like James Young. I got excited for a second. I'm not going to lie. We have so many people in the media who who try to pretend they're not rooting for certain people or that they're not protecting coaches or all these different things. Like, I just feel like I'm going to be transparent about it. The one thing I have to ask you about LeBron, this is really important because you've been talking about the Love trade. You think it's pretty much done. Yeah, you've been in the news the last 24 hours or so saying like you feel like there's a handshake deal all the way around. Do you think LeBron goes to Cleveland if he doesn't think/know that they're getting Kevin Love?
I think he might still go to Cleveland, but I think he's known they were going to get Kevin Love for a while now.
Right.
And
we'll qualify a while now.
Weeks.
Before he picked them?
Maybe.
Do you think it's suspicious that Anthony Bennett and Andrew Wiggins were not in that Sports Illustrated letter? Because I did. That was my first reaction reading that. Like, wow, these guys aren't in the letter.
I don't think it's suspicious. I think it was intentional.
I do too.
I have to be careful how I say this because I've been getting myself in trouble for saying stuff like that I shouldn't be saying. LeBron has expected Kevin Love to be a teammate of his for several weeks. And
I agree.
So here's the thing, like, I sort of feel like this deal was done on the ownership level. Dan Gilbert called Glenn Taylor and said, let's do this deal. And, Flip Saunders and David Griffin worked out the pieces and parts. And, this is a very unusual NBA situation. This is, to my knowledge, this has never happened before, where you're going to have the number one pick traded in August, and the league is not crazy about it. And I'm sure the league is a little bit upset that everybody has noticed that you can't buy an Andrew Wiggins jersey on NBA.com unless you personalize it.
Right. But
they're not selling them. That Glenn Taylor comes out the other day and says, yeah, we're going to trade Kevin Love on August 23rd. Just picks that, why does he have that date? So I sort of feel like this was done at the ownership level. And at this point, LeBron James is basically a functional co-owner of the Cavs.
Which is a little frightening because when players make front office decisions, the history is not good. And you even look at what happened with Miami when those guys signed and hey, let's lock up Haslam and go get this guy. And it's like, how many of those guys actually made it or how many of those retroactively were good decisions when you look back,
basically LeBron is saying, listen, we're going to trade for Kevin Love, but we're trading a potential all-star in Wiggins for a guy we only control for 1 year. Okay, well, we're going to trade for Kevin Love.
Right.
And,
or I'm not coming.
Well, I don't think it's not coming. I think he's coming either way, but I think he made it clear. Let's do the Love deal.
Maybe he didn't say I'm not coming, but maybe he said, look, if I come, I really want us to trade for Kevin Love. Okay. Can I make that clear?
Yeah.
Can we trade for Kevin Love? Can that be part of this maybe?
Yeah.
Sure, LeBron, anything you want.
Right. Well, everything with that letter was so brilliantly planned out. That and also I feel like he decided he was coming back to Cleveland after he went on his family vacation. He actually went on 2 vacations. He went with Ray Allen and James Jones with their families. They went over to the Bahamas, and then he went during the first week of free agency. He went farther down in the Caribbean. I think he went to Nevis, I think everything was perfectly orchestrated. I think the idea that the first day that Rich Paul was meeting with teams in Cleveland, he specifically tweeted out a photo of him and his son fishing. I think that was orchestrated so that he literally showed that he was 2,000 miles away from these meetings. And I think when he came back from those, I think he and his family discussed it on that trip, and he decided at that time he was going to go to Cleveland. And he came back, I was like around the 7th or 8th of July. I don't know what the exact date. And his wife puts on Instagram a photo of Ohio and says the comeback or the countdown is real or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think he decided, he knew he was leaving for Brazil because he had a Nike thing. And I think he decided he was going to release it on the day before he left for Brazil. I think it was all arranged. And, his people quickly scrambled and said, no, that thing on Instagram, that had nothing to do with it. But I think it absolutely was that. And I think he absolutely posted that Instagram pic to let everybody know he was away from these meetings. And I think the letter was written without Wiggins or Bennett, because I think Bennett's going to be in the trade. Bennett wasn't mentioned either, but he mentioned Dion Waiters, who's a guy who's a bit of a controversial player in Cleveland, but LeBron really likes his game. And I talked to Dion last week in Vegas, and Dion is I actually kind of like Dion's attitude. I kind of like his swagger. But he said something that was so interesting to me. He said, I'm going to be watching video of Wade. I'm going to go watch how Dwayne Wade played with LeBron and see if I can figure out how to play off the ball. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if he came up with that on his own, or I wonder if he had communicated with LeBron and LeBron suggested that to him, because he said he had been in contact with LeBron.
I have your answer. 100% LeBron told him that. 100%. Because they have weirdly similar games, Dion Waiters and Wade, for like how you would envision those a two guard playing with LeBron, right? Somebody who can create their own shot, somebody who can do the hard cuts to the basket, somebody with a lot of confidence and swagger. He's not as tall as Wade was, but I like Dion Waiters' game. I just never liked him as a starting two guard. I think if he's your heat check 6-man guy, he could be the best guy in the league at that. Like, he could be a better version of Jamal Crawford potentially. I just don't think him and Kyrie Irving together as a starting backcourt playing 40 minutes a game makes sense. You know?
I agree, but I got to tell you, some analytics guys pointed out to me that Waiters' catch and shoot numbers last year were pretty good.
We're pretty good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So I think what I think Waiters was included because LeBron wanted to keep playing with Waiters, and I think Bennett and Wiggins, LeBron weren't included in that letter for a reason.
Waiters is a good bet when you think like two coaches, two terrible teams, a bunch of young guys, no real veterans other than Jared Jack. Two bad coaches, by the way. And then on top of it, playing with, a young point guard who has no idea how to like lead or set up his teammates or anything. I think all the things that happened to him in Cleveland were understandable. I like his game. I'm not sure from an attitude standpoint if he's going to get there. He does seem a little head casey, but that's a guy that in a playoff game can come in and score 16 points in a quarter. He's a great wrinkle for any sort of series, I feel like. Sean Marion too would help them, I think.
I think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think that's actually been lined up for a while too. Now, again, Sean Marion didn't know Paul George was going to go down, and maybe there's an interesting opportunity in Indiana, but we can get paid some more money. But and so this is all careful. I just have to be careful by saying anything's done because it's so fluid in the NBA. But I think Sean Marion's headed there. I don't think Sean Marion's coming to Cleveland to meet with those guys if he's just on a fishing expedition. I think that's probably going to happen. And so now you're going to have Mike Miller and Sean Marion coming off the bench. Those are guys with rings.
So here's their team. Love's in there. I wonder who starts with Love. Varejao?
I think so. Their center position is still their weak spot. Their backup point guard right now is Matthew Dellavedova.
I kind of like him.
Yeah, he's feisty.
I think he's good.
Your backup center right now is Brendan Haywood.
Okay, so let's say. Well, I guess Thompson would technically be kind of their backup big, right? So
yeah,
Varejao, Kevin Love. Man, I still would want to bring Dion Waiters off the bench. I wonder if they'd start Marion with LeBron. Kyrie that is in there. Mike Miller, Brendan Hayward. I didn't even realize James Jones stuck on this team. Wow, he must have really helped LeBron in some sort of situation we'll never know about.
Like I said, LeBron is functioning as sort of the co-owner right now.
James Jones. The one part of this whole LeBron and everybody talking about Cleveland and can they win the East, all this stuff. Varejao can't stay on the court. I seem to be the only person who's noticed this. It just seems like he's never healthy, or just when he's coming on, he gets hurt. And Are we sure this guy can play a 100-game season? Because that's what's going to need to happen in 4 rounds.
No, and I love Andy. I've known Andy since he came in the league in 2004. I think the big thing here is if you're lining the Bulls up with the Cavs, is that the Bulls are going to defend.
Yeah.
And the Cavs, really the guy who the Cavs should have figured out a way to get, and the timing of it didn't work out. But the guy who was available that they probably could have pulled off is Omer Sheik.
Yeah, that's too bad because he went in June. But Varejao, 31 games in 2011, 25 games in 2012, 25 games in 2013, and 65 last year. So
and
remains to be seen.
Say he is healthy. He's not a rim defender. He takes charges and he's a good pick and roll player, but he doesn't defend the rim.
Right. Ideally, you'd want him playing 20 to 25 minutes a game as your energy backup big guy off the bench would be my dream scenario for him.
Yeah.
And they're stuck with, would you agree that they're stuck with Tristan Thompson and cannot trade him because Rich Paul is his agent and there had to have been some sort of wink-wink deal, which is an NBA tradition where the agent who delivers the player that the team wants then gets paid by also getting a ludicrous extension the following year for one of his other clients by the same team. Is that fair to say that's in play here?
Yeah, so what happened, every time the Heat did something sort of quasi-funky, people would scream about insider trading and salary cap circumvention and violations, even though the Spurs pretty much did all the same stuff that the Heat did. But because the Heat were a target, they would get, fairly or unfairly wrapped. In fact, I got executives complaining to me about the Wade contract, saying, well, how much money are they going to pay him when they make him their director of community operations? They're going to pay him $4 million a year for 3 years, when he retires and stuff. The Cavs are probably going to give Tristan Thompson an extension that is over his market value, and it will have been a very good investment because he's represented by LeBron's agency, Rich Paul, and it will be a no-brainer, and every team in the league would do it, and it will be technically legal.
Yeah.
Technically legal. Yeah.
Who do you think is going to make more money with their team after they retire, Dwayne Wade or Dirk Nowitzki? Do you think Dirk is going to be a special advisor who makes $13 million a year?
So that Dirk contract, it all happens so fast and amongst this other stuff.
Yeah.
And so, the Dirk contract and the Kobe contract, you could write an addendum to the book of basketball on those two contracts.
Yeah, I might have to write another book of basketball. So anyway, what happens with you with this Cleveland thing? You grew up in Ohio. Do you move back? What's your plan here?
What do you think I should do? My lease is up at the end of the month in New York.
You have a house in Ohio already, right?
I could not sell it. I have a condo in Cleveland that I bought when I had no money when I was like 24.
And you still have it?
It's been on the market for 4. It was sort of funny. It's been on the market for 4 years. It's on the market. It was last time it was on the market. It was on the market for 40% less than I paid for it in 2000.
Now you just keep it.
And I was like, yeah, I took it off the market. And my bosses were like, oh, really? But the market didn't notice. Trust me, it wasn't like there was 4 offers.
Yeah.
But honestly, what do you think I should do? Like seriously, because Cleveland is incredibly intriguing, and no matter what happens, if LeBron had gone to play in Portland, I would be with him a lot. That's just going to be my role. Most people probably don't even know that I've lived in New York the last few years because I'm with the Heat all the time.
Yeah.
What would you do?
I would keep the Cleveland place, and I would get an apartment somewhere else. Maybe just keep maybe you just stay in Cleveland. You have a place. But the problem is you've been caught in the ESPN vortex. I think you're just on. You have your own channel at this point. You're just on TV 24 hours a day. So it has to be something convenient for you that when you're on your 24-hour channel, you're not having to be in an airport all the time.
Yeah,
who wants to be in an airport too much?
Everybody on ESPN, like as soon as the NBA season ends, it's like vacation season at ESPN because it's the interim before the football season starts, and everybody knows football dictates ESPN. So we had all this time to fill. And, like, if you were an NBA guy, you were just on, because even now, like, everybody's still on vacation. I actually am surprised you're working.
I'm always working somehow.
So as soon as the football season starts, ESPN will, like, forget the NBA exists.
Which is a shame, because I feel like we're sleeping on this World Championships. We're not even sending an announcing crew to Spain, which is incredible. Like, think of all the people that were watching that Friday night game when Paul George broke his leg.
Oh,
and we haven't even talked about that yet, but like, people are home on Friday night watching a freaking Team USA intra-squad scrimmage. I feel like people are going to watch the World Championships. I wish we cared more about it.
Well, one problem is they're in Europe, so the time's going to be off, and it's during football season.
Right.
If you ever got Mark Cuban's dream and got the World Cup to be owned by the NBA, you'd have to play it like right now. It'd have to be going on now. You can't play it during football season. That's just
it would
now.
be late, like last 2 weeks of August, right? Right before college football starts would be ideal.
You'd have to take advantage of this window right now where there's no live sporting events that anybody cares about.
I never weighed in on the whole Paul George thing, which was obviously, just awful, and for a million different reasons. But I was excited to watch him on Team USA. I felt like he was the only type of player that America has who does all the things that he does. I think they would have used him like they used Iguodala 4 years ago as this jack of all trades, guards 4 positions, could play. You can go small with him, you go big for him. I think like the full arsenal of Paul George stuff would have been unleashed. So from that standpoint, just the Team USA point, bummer. Losing one of the best 10 guys from the NBA, bummer. The injury was horrific, and I really am concerned that he's going to come back 100% from that, because he's going to lose a year. And then you have that second year where you come back, who knows mentally, like he trust in the leg, all that stuff. That's a bummer. And then it just kills the Pacers. Like, just reading these stories about what do the Pacers do, how like the injury exception, like they're destroyed. I don't think they're a playoff team. You pull Paul and Lance off that team, that's 40 points a game. Those were their 2 ball handlers. Everything they did offensively went through those 2 guys, except for the David West ISOs. I don't see how they're a playoff team. What do you think?
Well, let me go over a couple of things. First off, Bill, you would have loved being in Vegas during the practices last week, because at the end of every workout, Paul George, James Harden, and Kevin Durant would play like these one-on-one games. I guess you call it King of the Hill, where they, you got to stop the guy to get the ball. It was one of the most enjoyable things I've ever seen in 12 years covering the NBA. First off, James Harden was defending like a banshee.
Yeah.
All right. The Rocket fans would have been horrified, because they wouldn't have believed this was in him. Secondly, Durant just absolutely could not be stopped. And these guys are working their tails off to try to stop Durant.
Yeah.
And it's just a guy in the absolute prime of his game. 22-footers, 15-foot hook shots, reverse. It was watching those guys compete on that level was one of the most enjoyable things I've really ever seen in a practice. And I like made sure I would come back and watch it every day. And it was funny, like some of the Team USA select guys would like crowd around and watch. Like I remember Victor Oladipo was sitting there just watching. I think he was actually hoping to get invited into the game, and that invitation was not coming.
Sorry, Victor.
So I was just so much enjoying that, and Paul was competing so much. Paul looked really good. Paul just couldn't stop Durant. I mean, I had our ESPN film crew like tape like 10 minutes of it. I don't know if we'll ever use it, but it's just to have it documented. And then everything, you know how people say things flash before your eyes when there's a traumatic event? Unfortunately, I had a complete clear sight line of Paul's injury. I saw it.
Oh, no.
Most of the media didn't see it. I unfortunately saw it exactly happen. And it all flashed in front of my face in 2 seconds. I knew he'd broken his leg. I knew he was out for the year. I knew the Pacers were screwed. I knew that game wasn't going to continue. And later on, I was thinking, that's why the Cavs have to trade for Kevin Love. Because the Pacers window is now, it might be shut. And I have spent so much time with that team over the last 3 years, and I've spent a lot of time getting to know Paul. And, I still, on one hand, I understand why they didn't pay Lance. But on the other hand, it seemed like it got sort of weird at the end. They were like $300,000 apart per year.
Yeah.
And it was almost like Lance was saying, I'm gonna make my statement, and the Pacers like, well, we're gonna make our statement. And it was sort of like, now if Lance is still on that team, I feel like he could potentially grow into that role and potentially become an all-star, at least carry them a little bit for this next year.
And they would have rented
guys,
Sean Marion for a year and tried to make a go of it.
Now, without those two guys, their window, I just don't see it. Hibbert can be a free agent after the year. I know that he probably won't be, but you know how big men get paid. He might opt out. And David West, I think, has a player option. That team could break up before Paul George gets back.
And David West has. I was going to just say he has a lot of miles on him. I don't think
he's past his prime.
I'm looking him up right now. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much longer this will be year 12 for him. And I'm not sure how much longer you count on him.
One of the sleepers in the 2003 draft. You got to include him in that class when we talk about it. But
yeah,
and that's why I'm like, if you're the Cavs, it's a huge risk for Love, because if I'm Jeff Schwartz's agent, under no circumstances am I picking up my option or am I signing an extension. It doesn't make any sense on any level. I don't care how in love you are playing with LeBron. So there's an inherent gamble that you're going to trade number one pick and potentially two other nice assets for Love on a rental. But if you're the Cavs, I get it. And this is the reason. Because you never know. You can't count on your window. You have to try to win it. And the Pacers, I know I actually think by about 1 a.m. after the surgery and talking with the Pacers people and some of Paul's people, there was an incredible relief after they got outside that surgery, because they went in there and they said, okay, he's going to be okay.
Yeah.
There's actually a real strong belief that he's going to come back 100%, but he's not going to come back 100% for a year. And I don't know if the Pacers' expiration date goes that long.
Yeah, I think 2014 is for the NBA the year of windows. And you look at like Oklahoma City, I don't think any team can assume that they're going to have a 6-year run or a 7-year run or whatever. You just don't know. Like Chicago thought that with Derrick Rose. The Celtics thought they were going to be in the finals for 5 straight years with KG. He goes down in 2009. They never win another title. Like, you just don't know. It's too easy for guys to get hurt. It's too easy for guys to get knocked out. It's too easy for guys to deteriorate. And in the NBA, you're as good as your top 3 guys. And if you lose one of them, the whole thing flips, which is why I hated the Harden trade when it happened, and I hate it even more now, especially after hearing that story about him versus Paul George versus Durant. You can't just assume you can roll it over year after year and always be competitive. And from Indiana's side, just letting that Lance thing get to where it got, and 5 years for 45 seems pretty fair for him. There had to have been more of a background with just I don't want to say animosity, but whatever the more benevolent word of animosity is. Something was going on there, because that seemed like that was like a staring contest about pride between the organization and Lance. They
wouldn't come off their number, and they were they were complaining about the luxury tax, which is a legitimate complaint, but then they kept signing other guys.
Yeah.
It's like, well, wait a minute. You keep signing other players who play Lance's position, and they had met with Rodney Stuckey before Lance even told them no. I mean, I got to tell you that Lance was the root of a lot of their issues last year.
No
Lance
question.
Lance is also 22, 23. He's an irreplaceable piece, and so I just felt like they had to re-sign him. Although I understood why they didn't, I just didn't understand the way they negotiated, and it's going to come back to hurt them. And they couldn't have foreseen. And by the way, Bill, here's the other thing. I mean, I realize that you can get hurt 1,000 different ways, but he got hurt because that stanchion was too close to the court.
Yeah.
There's no other way to say it. And I realize that UNLV's probably played 1,000 games on that basket and no one's ever done it. But the difference is Paul George is used to having more space.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, he was defending Harden on that play. That was the exact same scenario that they had in those practices for those last 3 days. Him going one-on-one with Harden. He was probably like, I'm going to get this guy. I'm going to block this shot.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons he went so hard. And
yeah, but this
so far
is
back.
I never saw the stanchion up close. You obviously know better than me, but this is a real problem with the NBA, that they're not going to address until somebody gets hurt, but how close the photographers are to the court too. How many times have we almost thought somebody was going to break their neck flying into the photographers? And it's like, until it happens, they're not going to do anything. And with this stanchion, like, it's one of those things, yeah, it's a little close and you don't do anything. But my thing is, I really hope this doesn't lead to guys not playing international basketball and all that stuff, because I feel like that injury could have happened. These guys play basketball all the time. You're
right.
There's always a chance you can get injured. It doesn't matter if it was in an inter-squad scrimmage or if he was playing the one-on-one games with Harden and Durant. These guys play. This is what they do. They want to play basketball every week. And they go hard and they get competitive, and injuries can happen.
You're right. During the course of an NBA season, teams have practices at high schools and college gyms. I mean, where they play up against walls and stuff.
Weird shoot-arounds, yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I have to say, otherwise I'll get an email from Tim Frank at the NBA. The NBA has actually moved the photographers back a couple of feet over the last 2 years. If you look at where they were in 2012 and 2014, they have made more space.
Still seems too close.
You're right. That said, the guys still keep going in there.
Especially in the finals. The guys are right on top of the court in the finals, and somebody's going to get hurt. But, you know, I think this injury was such a fluke injury that I think to overreact and say these guys can't play international basketball anymore, to make that decision for them as a league, or all the rhetoric that came out over these next 3 days is, to me, makes no sense. I've been following basketball since the mid-'70s. That's when my dad started taking me. I can only remember one other time in an NBA game that somebody broke their leg like that, and it was a game I went to. I think I was 7. Charlie Scott, who was my first favorite Celtic, actually broke his leg during a game, a lot like the Paul George thing, and got carried off. And you know, our seats were right where the players came in and out. Got carried off right by us on like a stretcher, and he was right. It was basically the same injury. That was 40 years ago, or 39 years ago, or 37 years ago, or whatever. Other than that, I can't remember this ever happening. Can you?
Well, you remember, you were there for London. I wasn't there in London, but you have talked about how much you enjoyed watching that basketball. And if you to take that away from guys, you're just not going to do it. I'll never forget. I covered the 2006 World Championships in Japan when Spain won. That was the year the U.S. lost to Greece, and Paul George broke his foot during the semifinals, I believe, which was a bad moment for the Grizzlies. And
wait,
so
who broke his foot?
Pau Gasol broke.
Oh, Pau Gasol, yeah,
yeah, and he's at the finals in a walking boot because he's just broken his leg. He's in Japan, and they beat Greece in the finals in the greatest moment in Spanish basketball history. And Gasol is running out on that without his crutches in that walking boot and jumping on the pile at the center of the court with his broken foot. So it just, you're not going to get rid of that passion. Well, and the other thing is, the country.
It's great for these guys. You know, like I really feel like Durant's performance in the 2010 World Championships was the most important thing that ever happened to his basketball career. Until those 2 weeks, we never saw that he could be the guy. And he took everything that happened to him after that was, you know, that kind of planted the seed those 2 weeks. And even you look at somebody like Kevin Love, who had a disappointing tournament at UCLA, has not made the playoffs in 6 years in the NBA. And you could have a real conversation about, can this guy contribute to a really good winning team? Is this even conceivable? We saw it. He played on Team USA in 2012, and he had big minutes, and he was basically playing the 5 for that team. And just based on those games that I watched with him playing with really good teammates, that changed my opinion of what his ceiling is. So, you know, I think there's still importance. I agree with Cuban that I would rather see the NBA own this tournament on its own terms, because every single player who's in it is going to be an NBA player, other than maybe, you know, 15, 20% of the guys in the overall tournament. But I'm talking about like the Final 4, Final 8. At the heart of those guys are going to be NBA players. So you might as well be supervising it 100%, have it in America, figure out a way to make money for it. I totally agree with them. But to tell these guys to not play basketball it seems a little communist. In
the group of deaths in this year's World Cup. Spain, France, and I think Slovenia are in the same pool. I think
Right.
there's more NBA players in that pool than there is in the pool that the U.S. team is in. So that just tells you that this is really becoming an NBA event. And I also should point out that Cuban's argument is different from the injury argument. His argument is an economic argument about who should get paid. His argument is not that you're never going to get rid of the risk. His argument is just that there should be a reward, and that really has nothing to do with Paul George breaking his leg.
No, but it's the catalyst to think about it a little differently. And these guys are taking a little bit of a risk, and the risk is basically for patriotism and to promote the game. Well, you can have patriotism and you can promote the game in a way that the NBA would own, And I think if I were the NBA commissioner, I would use college players for the Olympics. I would not use NBA players for the Olympics. And I would really put all my resources toward creating some sort of World Cup that would work in tandem with the NBA. And maybe during that season, it's 70 games instead of 82. And you really figure out a smart way to do it. That makes sense to me. And you could own it, and you could have it on in America at the right times, and figure out how to do it during a time when you're not competing against any other sport. And you think about how the World Cup in soccer promotes all those guys in ways that, people know who Messi are, but somebody like my wife wouldn't watch a Barcelona game with Messi, but she'll watch World Cup with Spain. And I don't think you can put a price on that stuff. So I wish there was a way they figured out the World Cup.
There's also like a bit of an IOC bubble here. I think the bubble on the Olympics is about to burst. Already nobody wants to host the Winter Games. They can't even get a bid. Yeah. And, it's sort of the IOC has just been continually unmasked. And so it's sort of a joke, the officiating and everything and some of the way things are gone are a joke anyway. So if you could take advantage, and I think they're going to, right now, the World Cup and World of Soccer World Cup and the Basketball World Cup are in the same year, but I think they're going to try to take them off the same year. I don't know if it's the next round, but they're going to only have it 3 years apart so that so they get off the same year. That's what their goal is. They also see basketball as the second largest sport in the world and growing. And the NBA, I think, is sort of sensing we should get in on this now while we can, because they feel like they can overpower FIBA, or at least become a partner with FIBA. It makes a lot of sense. I actually agree with a lot of what Cuban says. I think it makes sense for the NBA to take control of it and be the leader on it. And that's where the growth in the NBA is going to be, is internationally. They can't figure out how to get teams in Europe, or get their investment in China has been okay, but hasn't taken off the way they thought. This is a way to get it going, is to create an annual, every 4-year event that the whole world watches. That's their dream. And, I think you need the NBA's leadership to pull something like that off.
Well, Paul George, just a major bummer. I hate losing great players. I hate when anybody gets injured, as does anyone else. But it just, with losing somebody who I felt like was going to have an incredible season this year. He was year 5 for him. The Team USA experience was great. Getting a taste of the conference finals, the last 2 rounds, and all the stuff that happened there was great for him. And it just felt like this was going to be like his superstar breakout year, and hopefully it will. Yeah, Joe House's
Washington professional basketball team ends up coming. I don't like to use the word winner,
right?
But I think the Wizards. I saw it as a 3-team race for the East, with Pacers, Cavs, and Bulls. And now I think you bring the Wizards into the conversation, and maybe, depending on Wade, maybe the Heat, we'll see. But it just had such huge effects on so many different factors, and it just in one second on a false step, and it just, it was just such a gutting injury. And being around those guys in the back afterwards, they were just all so emotionally devastated. Yeah. I actually think they will turn into a positive, because I think when you see them reassemble next week in Chicago, you will see them. They're going to be playing for Paul. Not just now. They're always playing for their country, but now they're playing for Paul. And I think you will see a really renewed effort. It became clear to us over the weekend when we sort of stuck our toe in the water. Hey, are you guys still committed? Yes. We kept calling agents, GMs, and reaching players, everybody was a firm yes, and I think they're going to do it for Paul.
That's cool. Also made a mediocre conference even worse.
I know. You're right about
when
that.
Washington is and Charlotte now is kind of lurking.
And Atlanta.
Yeah, and Atlanta has a move or two to make, but we'll see what happens with Horford. Just quickly, the Team USA, Durant, Harden, Curry, Rose, Klay Thompson, and I think Kenneth Faried are the definites. After that, these are the remaining guys: Plumlee, Cousins, DeRozan, Drummond, Hayward, Kyrie Irving, Kyle Korver, Damian Lillard, Chandler Parsons.
I think Kyrie Irving's making the team. They see him as the future, and there's the Duke connection, which can never be dismissed. I think he's going to make it.
Kyle Korver or Parsons. I don't think you can have both.
I would prefer Kyle Korver because I feel like he's a veteran. He can play 2 or 3. He can bust the zone. He can sit there for 35 minutes, and then you need a zone buster. You'd send him in, and you can do it.
I agree. I think Gordon Hayward over DeMar DeRozan.
That's going to be an interesting decision. I think the most interesting, though, is Cousins versus Plumlee. I know that this is a ridiculous conversation to have because DeMarcus Cousins is 5 times more talented than Mason Plumlee.
I don't think he makes the team. Even like he intimated in interviews, like he's like, yeah, they want me to run. I got to get used to being a running big man. I think from a personality standpoint, I'm not saying he can't do it, but I think it's risky internationally. Like, let's say Davis gets 2 fouls in the first. Oh, I forgot to mention Anthony Davis. Probably should have mentioned him.
Yeah, you can slide him into the locker.
Yeah. So 8. So there's 8. But I think if Davis gets my fear with this team, and I care way too much because I'm a loser. They're in Spain. 2 fouls first 5 minutes for Anthony Davis. Now what happens? Who am I bringing in? And don't tell me Andre Drummond because that guy will shoot 2 air balls if anyone fouls him at any point in that game.
Team. I don't
think he makes it either.
I mean, are they playing Spain or are they just playing somebody else? Are they playing Spain?
Spain.
Yeah, because if they're playing somebody else, you could just play Durant at center. I'm serious.
But all we care about is the Spain game. That's it. High-low. They're going to run high-low with Pau and Mark, and we got to figure that out. Who are we guarding those 2 guys with?
To be honest with you, if they could leave Cousins here and just fly him over for the Spain game, I think they would. And that's sort of really the issue. Will Cousins be – because they're only going to play one center in most of these games. Would Cousins be content with sitting there on the bench and not playing? Or if he does play, playing 3 minutes?
I have a prediction. I think Kevin Love is on this team.
So that's been floated. It's a hard situation because so here's what I think. So if you're going to kick somebody off at the last minute to bring Love in, who's easier to kick off, Cousins or Plumlee?
I think they go with 11, and I think they wait until August. Can they wait until August 23rd? When does the tournament start?
I think the first game is the 30th. I
think they wait. I think they wait, and I think they wait, and I think they wait, and I think he's on this team. I think mainly because he has to be.
If they cut Cousins, there's going to be a revolt in Sacramento because just the mere mention of the possibility last week sent everybody into a rage. And by the way, it was because Krzyzewski was totally laying the groundwork for it.
Yeah.
He was like, Plumlee does this for us, and we're asking a lot from DeMarcus, but he's got to adjust. And then he was even, trying to take the teeth out of the Duke argument. He was like, no, it's not me who loves Plumlee. It's my coaches. And the day after that story came out, before that scrimmage, Vivek Ranadive and Chris Mullin were working Coach K on the sideline before the game, working him over.
But people need to understand this isn't an all-star team. They're not picking an all-star team. They're picking 12 guys whose styles and personalities and skills complement one another. DeMarcus Cousins is better at basketball than both of the Plumlees. But that doesn't mean he should be in the team. And that doesn't mean that, if you don't feel like he can play 8 minutes a game and that he'll be happy doing that, a situation he's never been in his whole life, you want to go into a tournament like this knowing you can count on each guy and exactly what you're getting. You don't want X factors. You can afford X factors if it's Charles Barkley in 1992 in Barcelona because you have Jordan and all those dudes on the team. This team can't afford an X factor after the Paul George injury, I don't think. But I think Kevin Love's going to be on.
I agree with you 100%. Tell it to the people in Louisville and Sacramento if that happens.
Listen, there's no bigger Boogie Cousins fan than me. But if Coach K doesn't feel like he's the right fit for this team, I'm not going to say he's wrong. Last thing, just quickly, this midseason tournament that they've been floating around, I thought of a possible prize, and I'm just throwing it at you. I think this is one of my better ideas in a while. Because we always think about, like, all right, what are the prizes with a tournament like this? So you get a guaranteed playoff spot. Like, what would incentivize all 30 NBA teams to actually try in a midseason tournament? And I think I came up with the answer. $5 million extra for the salary cap for the following season.
That's interesting.
It's pretty interesting. It's pretty good.
But you have to come up with something for the you have to give a piece of candy to the players too. You have to figure out something for them.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you have to incentivize the players to really want to go hard in it too. Otherwise, you're going to get exhibition style effort.
Oh, so they all get $500,000 bonuses. First place team.
Yeah, I think there's either monetary or something with the schedule where they get an extra 4 days off. You couldn't do that. But
no, you could. I think if you do this midseason tournament, I think you go to a 75-game schedule. I think you cut it back by 7 games, and you say we're going to give you a week off for All-Star, and we're also going to have this tournament. You guys are going to have 2 breaks during the season. We're going to stretch the season out, and the winner of this tournament gets paid. And the franchises are invested because you get $5 million to add to your salary cap next year if you win. And if you finish second, you get $2 million.
I like it. I'm all for this midseason tournament. I'm all for the end of season tournament too, although they don't sound as hot on that. But
can you imagine the Spurs
play in for the 8th spot?
Can you imagine the Spurs $5 million, and our luxury tax goes up by $5 million? Oh, we're bringing out the guns. This is it. I have solved it. Brian Windhorst, take a vacation, for God's sakes. Just take a vacation.
I know.
Just go somewhere.
I know. Zach
shut
Lowe's
up your cell
phone. I'm jealous of Zach Lowe off in Europe.
Yeah, it was time for Zach.
Football season's coming up. That'll be my vacation.
Yeah, and you got your big Browns under bet coming up. All right, so we think this Kevin Love trade, if you had to bet your life on it, you would bet that maybe on August 23rd, Kevin Love is a Cleveland
I'm not
Cavalier.
betting my life on anything, but let's put it this way.
You had to bet your life. You had to pick yes or no. You had to.
Yes.
Okay, I agree. Yes. I would also bet my life on that, and I wouldn't bet my life on this, but I would make a small wager on this trade.
Who's the most powerful man in the NBA?
Not Adam Silver?
Okay. Other than Adam Silver, who's the most powerful man in the NBA?
LeBron James.
He says it's done. So just take that for what it's worth.
All right. Enjoy the rest of the summer. Good talking to you.
All right. Take care, Bill. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.